Here.
Here.
Present. Here. Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Last public comment on the proposed ordinance amending the 2023 fiscal year budget in order to deposit $109,601.98 into the reserve fund. Anybody for public comment? Mr. Griffin?
Good evening. I won't comment on the public hearing for the transfer of 109,601.98 into the reserve fund. The only concern I have with that is that should have been done in 2022 when the budget was open. We received that money in January, I think, of this year, later than it was expected, and it was already put in the 2022 budget. It was put in the wrong line account, and then they corrected it and they put it in the correct line account. The concern that I have is that department is well overspent. Well overspent. If you look at the performance report for that department, they've overspent revenues and they've overspent expenditures. And we're going to take $109,000 out of that reimbursement fund. That was money that was paid to us by the state to reimburse the general fund for the expenses that we incurred in 22. The budget is closed. The accounting system is closed. I don't know how we're going to go into a closed accounting system and extract that money that's already been in place and put into that line item already. My suggestion is to vote the ordinance down, wait for the surplus, budget surplus, because you're obviously going to have a budget surplus this year, and transfer money that way, rather than try and play a shell game with $109,000. Basically, is what's happening here. The $109,000 is not near as much as we didn't do anything with the HAVA money. We got $165,000 in HAVA money. We didn't transfer any of that money. We could have clearly transferred $165,000 from the HAVA account into the reserve account as well. Why are we not touching that money? We're just touching $109,000. So I suggest that we wait until the auditors are finished, the audit is completed, and we end up with a budget surplus, and then you appropriate the money where you need to as of the surplus. This is not the way government accounting systems work. It certainly flies in the face of GAAP's regulations. So I don't know how the auditors will handle that going into the 22 budget. Extract money out, put it in a 23 account, but that's hopefully they'll look at that when they do the audit. But I would strongly urge council to vote no on that ordinance and then wait for the surplus and transfer it then.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Anybody else with public comment on the public hearing? Anybody on the Zoom? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Start the regular meeting at 6:01. Please go back for my mic.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
All right, I'm gonna call this voting session to order. We already had the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Roll call, please, Ms. Lawrence.
Mr. Venus. Mr. LaScavitch.
Here.
Mr. Lombardo.
Here.
Ms. McDermott. Here. Mr. McGinley.
Present.
Mr. Mitchell.
Here.
Mr. Perry.
Here.
Mr. Thornton.
Here.
Mr. Urban.
Here.
Mr. Lovett.
Here.
And Ms. Radel absent.
Okay.
11.
Thank you. All right, we have 3 proclamations tonight. The first one is a proclamation for Eagle Scout Daniel Kernan. Whereas Daniel Kernan of Boy Scout Troop 25 has attained one of Boy Scout of America's most coveted and prestigious awards, the lofty rank of Eagle Scout. And whereas this fine example of our region's youth has continuously demonstrated outstanding citizenship, unwavering determination, and concern for his community. And whereas Daniel has put forth a great deal of hard work and dedication in his quest to accomplish the merits needed to be named Eagle Scout. And whereas many admirable qualities are reflected in his Eagle Scout project for the Shades of Death Trail in Hickory Run State Park, he created a curving staircase between the 2 sections of 16 steps constructed of 2x6 rebar, lag bolted together with gravel and soil fill. Gravel sides for runoff to preclude further washout was built, and landing pads on both ends to traverse the pathway. Final staircase work was accepted by the park rangers and provides a safer, more environmentally conscious path for use of the trail by hikers. Whereas Luzerne County is happy to recognize the impressive efforts of our new Eagle for the pride he's brought to his family and community. Now, therefore, we, the Luzerne County Council, do hereby honor, applaud, and congratulate Eagle Scout Daniel Kernan. Here, anybody from his family, if you'd like to come pick up the proclamation, it'll be here. If not, it'll be in the county council chambers with Ms. Lawrence. The second proclamation is for Pennsylvania 4-H month. Whereas 4-H is America's largest youth development organization, supporting nearly 6 million youth across the country, and whereas 4-H has helped youth in Luzerne County to become confident, independent, resilient, and compassionate leaders as they learn by doing, and whereas 4-H in Pennsylvania is delivered by Penn State Extension in rural areas, small towns, and cities in all 67 counties of the Commonwealth to more than 77,000 youth ages 5 to 18. And whereas 4-H youth in Pennsylvania are served by a network of staff members and more than 6,000 adult volunteers who engage and mentor youth in learning activities and hands-on projects in topics such as animal science, civic engagement, STEM, and health and wellness. And whereas Pennsylvania 4-H Week showcases the incredible ways that 4-H inspires kids to achieve and highlights the remarkable 4-H youth in Luzerne County who work each day to make a positive impact on those around them. And whereas 4-H's network provides youth with opportunities for leadership development, career exploration, problem solving, friendships, community involvement, passion, and purpose. Now, therefore, we, the Luzerne County Council, hereby proclaim March as Pennsylvania 4-H month throughout Luzerne County and encourage our citizens to acknowledge and celebrate 4-H for its valuable service and continued efforts to empower youth with a foundation of success for a lifetime. If anybody's here from 4-H. No? Okay. All right. Well, this will be in the council chambers with Ms. Lawrence. Our final proclamation is for National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services, and whereas the safety of our first responders is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the Luzerne County Communications Center, and whereas public safety telecommunicators are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services, and whereas public safety telecommunicators are the single vital link for our first responders by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information, and ensuring their safety. And whereas each telecommunicator has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of their job. And now, therefore, we, the Luzerne County Council, do hereby proclaim the week of April 9th, 2023 to be National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week in Luzerne County in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our county and citizens safe. Thank you very much to the telecommunicators of the county. And Mr. Rosenkrantz, I don't know if you have anything to say, but thank you very much. We appreciate all your hard work in the process of making sure that the 911 center runs very smoothly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lombardo. I appreciate you recognizing our telecommunicators, and we'll be celebrating all week at the 911 center. And as invited, all the council members, a reminder on Thursday at 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. I'd love to offer you a tour of our newly renovated 911 PSAP floor. It turned out really nice, and it's a nice addition to our facility. So thank you again.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, any deletions from the voting session agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda. as
I
presented.
actually, I apologize. I'd like to make one deletion. I'd like to delete number 2, the motion to introduce the ordinance adopting a parking ordinance in Hanover Township. There was some conversation with the Hanover Township supervisors and the police chief, and they haven't had an opportunity to have an in-depth review of this just yet. Mr. Venus, I think, was going to speak more on this. He's obviously not here yet. He'll be here shortly, I think. But if it's okay, I'd like to delete number 2.
So I make the motion to delete item 2.
Okay.
Why
Second,
would we get this ordinance if there was no inspection by Hanover Township? That, to me, doesn't make any sense that we have it. We've had it on our work session, and now we have it on our voting session. So that's a month.
right.
And now we find out that Hanover hasn't looked at it.
I know that Hanover Township just reached out to Mr. Venus, I think specifically within the last week or so. Mr. Kurtz, I don't know if you have anything further you want to speak on about this.
Yes, so there was a
Has to come in.
communication
Oh.
going to.
You have to come up.
Sorry.
So there was communication going over to Hanover Township, but due to some kind of IT problems, issues over there, they weren't receiving the information. I had verbal that they would be support and enforce a parking ordinance because it is a problem out there. And they're all on board for solving that issue. But apparently the ordinance itself did not make it to them until we figured this out earlier today. So they have that in their hands. So yeah, I would recommend, and true, until today, I wasn't asked to have a in writing request for or approval that they will enforce this ordinance.
Is this something that's like extremely time sensitive that we would need to
No.
pass? Okay,
No,
so we can wait until
no,
the next
it's
meeting
okay.
if possible.
Yeah.
All right, okay. So you guys keep your smoke for a second.
Delete second.
Okay, all right.
Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Mr. LaScavitch?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott? Yes. Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Lovett?
Yes.
Unanimous.
All right. It is removed. Thank you very much. Any other deletions or is there a motion to adopt?
Second the motion to adopt.
All right, motion by Mr. McGinley, second by Mr. Thornton. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the agenda is adopted. All right, we'll have public comment on agenda items only. Controller Griffith.
My comment is on item number 5. I'll go to the last one first, which is 5. I spoke about that at the public hearing, and the reason I would encourage council to vote no on that transfer of the $109,000 is if you look at a budget performance report for that department, is considerably overspent in expenses, considerably to like 18% over budget on spending overall in the whole department. We did have the HAVA money, which is the Help America Vote Act, which they received $165,000 in reimbursements, but we're not touching that. So I think we should wait until the budget is or the audit is complete. If we have a budget surplus, then you can transfer money into the reserve as needed by council for expenditures that you may wish to do that with. The other item that I have on my list of items to speak about is the very first one regarding the proposed ordinance for, or resolution for the, no, it's an ordinance, I'm sorry, for the restriction of vehicles on Honey Hole Road. The county spent an awful lot of money on Honey Hole Road over the years. I believe back in the commissioner days, they revamped a good portion of that road. And I think the county just put a bridge there in Honey Hole Road too, not too far along, with the understanding that these municipalities were supposed to take these roads over. I understand the idea of the weight restriction. However, I think that Butler Township needs to take that road over and they can put any restriction on it they want, instead of making this council be the person who puts a weight restriction on the road so they could possibly take the road over. I think we spend enough money on Honey Hole Road that Butler Township should make the commitment to say they're going to take the road and they can put the signs up and anything they wish. They want the county to spend all the money to do that. And then they'll say, well, we'll take the road over now after we spend all the money to make it to their liking. I don't think that's fair to the taxpayers of the county. If they want that weight restriction, let them put it on. Let them own the road and let them take care of it. The road's in enough. And the study that they're relying on is a 2018 study. We did a study that cost the county taxpayers a lot of money in 2018 for that road for weight restrictions, and we did nothing with that study until just recently. Why did we wait all that time? We had a 5-year study that we spent money on it. We didn't do anything with. And the last thing that I needed to talk about is the issue with the number 4 is the UDU lease agreement. There's a $1,000 a month increase in that lease agreement. And I don't understand why the last time they increased the rent on that property was $200 a month. Now, all of a sudden this year, it jumps up to $1,000 a month increase. Council needs to take a look and see if that's a worthwhile increase for the building that we've been paying for all along. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Anybody else for public comment on agenda items only? Mr. Griffin?
Council, members of the public, Greg Griffin, Swoyersville. I think it's great. I think it's great that you're getting an ordinance imposing restrictions on the weight of vehicles operating on county roads. Many county roads are being heavily damaged by overweight trucks. The taxpayers have to pay it in the end. The question is, when you make a law like this on overweight trucks and restrictions and whatnot, the next question is, who enforces it? Now, the sheriff's department doesn't enforce it. Local municipalities don't have the training, Department of Transportation training, because to put a tractor trailer on weights and calibrate it and all that stuff, it takes the state police, and they do that regularly. The question is, who in the county will coordinate with the state police once we have this ordinance and to find out how many troopers are on the county roads weighing trucks? You know, it's one thing to have an ordinance, but who's going to follow up with the commissioner of the state police and say, hey, how many troopers have you sent to Luzerne County roads? Because we're getting hammered here. Our roads are deteriorating prematurely by overweight trucks coming from these massive big box industries with the KOZ grants. They're ruining our roads. None of them have been getting weighed. And so we're going to make this ordinance, and I think that's just grand. So who in the county will coordinate with the state police and say, look, we need more troopers out here. Our roads are getting decimated. So make the law, but the people want follow through in our government. It's not good enough to say, oh, we have an ordinance against that. The thing is it being followed through? Or are there going to be 30 trucks a month weighed by the state police? 100 trucks? 10 trucks? So making an ordinance is just great what you're all doing. But the next question is, who's going to monitor the weighing of the trucks? We have the state police. We pay taxes. They work for us. We can ask them to come to our county roads on a periodically. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Before we go any further, I don't know who's back there from IT, but would somebody from IT be able to send Councilman Venus a link to the meeting? He's having some trouble logging in, I think. All right. Anybody else for public comment?
I do. Joe Grantede Plains. I have to take the opposite approach to this. Anytime you give these truckers a ticket, the goods that they move are going to cost us more. About 10 years ago, Pennsylvania put a 10-cent tax for road reconstruction to upgrade the roads. Then another 10-cent tax the next year, and another 10-cent tax the next year. If our roads are not in good shape, then we need to find out what's happening with all that money. And that's all I have to say about it. But like I said, in the end, it costs us more.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment on agenda items only? Anybody on the Zoom? All right, if not, we'll move into the agenda.
Motion to approve the minutes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, minutes are approved. All right, item number 1 on the agenda, motion to introduce ordinance imposing restrictions as to the weight of vehicles operated upon county roads, providing for the issuance of permits and posting of security for the movement of vehicles of a weight in excess of restrictions, and prescribing penalties for violations. This is just the motion to introduce the ordinance.
So moved, Willoughby.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
To address some of the concerns raised tonight. I know back when I served on Borough Council here in the county, we actually paid for an officer or two to go away and be trained properly on truck inspections. Officer Foy, who's in the room tonight, back of the room, was one of our officers who did a great job and would stop tractor trailers on Route 11 and do a full inspection underneath everywhere on the truck. And he was properly trained, and many, many times, most of the time, found several violations with each truck that he pulled over. So I think the answer to maybe some of this enforcement concerns would be to have the townships and the boroughs themselves train the officers if they so wish to enforce some of these trucking violations going through the towns. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Go ahead, Mr. Liscavige.
So is this for Honey Hole Road only? Because the resolution reads Luzerne County roads, own roads, 100, and explains the mileage, and
I think it's for Honey Hole Road only.
there's an exhibit that says Honey Hole Road, but then in the resolution, it says roads.
Ordinance.
And it spells out the mileage and how many roads.
Right. Mr. Kurtz, do you have anything to say on this?
So this ordinance is mainly designed to handle problematic issues, heavy loading in large numbers. Honey Hole Road today and in its past had normal operations where a truck would pass over and that wasn't the issue. You could handle, the road could handle that kind of capacity. Where the issue comes is when an industry or something is going to be built in that particular area with high volume of truck traffic. That's where it deteriorates and destroys the roads in a very short period of time. We've seen that up in northern Pennsylvania when they started with the gas drilling. So we're trying to head this off because there are some applications and some plans for development of businesses that will be out in that area with high volume of truck traffic. So the way the ordinance will work is a truck that would come through there that may be overweight wouldn't be affected by this ordinance. It would be, the ordinance indicates that we would have a bond with the companies that are high volume in that area. And a bond amount would be determined by a third party based on how many trucks they would have passing over the road, and we would have to provide a condition of the road before any of this starts. So the penalty would not go to the truck drivers and cause us increased costs. It would go to the businesses who are earning money off of the trucks passing over our road that is not designed for that kind of loading and that frequency. So, and on another note, Butler Township did say they would enforce it to the extent that is necessary. But it wouldn't be for a delivery to a house, for example. That person, there's limitations to the ordinance so that truck drivers like that would not get fined.
What businesses are in that area?
Pardon me?
What businesses use that road?
There is a company, Deep Well Incorporated, that has drilled a high volume well out there, and they're preparing to truck the tankers out through that road. So that's high volume, heavy trucks that will destroy that road in months, not years. It's in talking to experts, it's going to be a very short period of time if we don't do something, or it's going to destroy that road.
So here's where my frustration sets in with all of this. This starts out as a zoning issue, right? All these warehouses are going up. At some point, the roads aren't going to accommodate all this growing, i.e. Hazleton. They're talking about another big development down there. Their borderline don't have enough water to serve that municipality and city. So at what point does somebody say, hey, you know what? Maybe we just can't do this. Or we'll worry about the water when it runs out, or the roads can't be used, right? I mean, I don't know how it gets to that stage. I do know how, but it should. It needs to be stopped before it gets that far.
Unfortunately, the zoning laws are in some ways in favor of that development, and by it not having the ability to stop an organization, an industry from coming, if they don't have the proper placement. Maybe Matt could speak more to that. But so zoning could only rule on what the zoning laws are for that particular community. And then there's the Pennsylvania code that requires every community, every zoning district to have a certain amount of industrial space available. And if you do not have that space available, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, if you do not have that space available, they could dictate where they want to be. And that's what you don't want, because, you know, so they do come in and they choose to a location, and you either allow them in that location, or they, if they choose to fight that, they could pick a different location that's less desirable. In this particular case, they followed what they had to follow, and as far as Butler Township taking over the roads, there's an agreement in place where Butler Township will take over any of the roads in the township that the county wants to turn over. But within that agreement, the township roads have to be up to PennDOT standards, PennDOT spec, before they would take over that road. We just recently finished one before I came with you guys up Foothills Drive, and that one was completed and turned over successfully to Butler Township. So the process is in place, but the funding to bring that road up to PennDOT specs isn't available right now to do that and turn it over before this would happen. So we're trying to save what we have right now in order to.
Are they up to speed, this new company, on the fees that they're going to be imposed?
Pardon me?
Is this new company up to speed with what fees are gonna be imposed upon them with this?
There's no ordinance in place yet. So they wouldn't have any of this information until there's an ordinance to actually propose to them. Then what they would have to do is request to drive X amount of trucks over this roadway. And then we would have to determine with a third party what the cost for that should be. They would put a bond in escrow, and a cost would be determined how much it would cost to restore the road to a condition that they could operate on.
To Mr. Kirk, to follow up on that point. So the bond would be put in place if this ordinance passes, and that company would legally be obligated to pay that bond upfront, which would be like an escrow account. So when they destroy the roads, there's ample money there that they already put up for us to go back and repair and replace the road.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and that's why the inspection, a full inspection and documentation of current today conditions will have to be done before the start of that, because they're not responsible for any, duration that might be there now. And that road is it's in pretty decent shape now. It's not like some of those that we have much more difficulty with.
My only fear is that we end up in litigation over this, only because if we have identical roads in the county and they're not posted the same, now you're picking and choosing which roads because somebody put the business there.
So in the ordinance, someone mentioned, is this one road or is it many? In the ordinance, the last page of the ordinance is Exhibit A.
I saw that.
Exhibit A is to add roads to the counties, to this ordinance, as the county sees fit. So if there's other areas where this same scenario is happening, we would add that road. First, you have to do a study of the road. You have to do an analysis to determine what the proper load, allowable loading would be for it. And then you would then add that roadway to the ordinance and advertise it and go through the proper legal proceedings to add it. So this likely won't be the last road that we will be doing this with. But again, it's going to be for heavy, frequent truck traffic that's changed in that area. The roads weren't built for that, as we all know.
Mr. Urban, looking at this ordinance, you stated that, other roads can be added. Will that come before council before you determine it as a department, to do a traffic study or to, because I think we as the body here should be the ones that,
Right.
approve the spending of the money to do the traffic study for the addition to be on the list. The other
Harry,
thing-
I'd
Go
like
ahead.
to defer to Harry. Harry, how would that process work?
Because it should be defined in this ordinance before you even decide to pass it. The other thing is before you get involved.
Well, I guess.
Let me finish my other point first. The definition section, okay, under section 102 of the vehicle code has all the actual definitions laid out. I only see a small number of definitions here under section 3 of this ordinance. And if somebody goes to court and there's a disparity between our definitions and what the actual vehicle code is, which is throughout the Commonwealth, we're probably going to lose the case in court. So I think, this needs to go back and just take a look at that entire section of definitions, because, there are other definitions of like emergency vehicles and various other types of vehicles that aren't included in here. So, somebody could have a different type of vehicle and bypass this ordinance and nobody's really care. So, and the other thing is obviously the enforcement issue too. Are we going to have people posted out there? So really, how are you going to enforce it? And Mr. Griffin did bring up a good point. But the definition should mirror what's actually in the state law. State statute is the guiding factor of the vehicle code. And so we're deviating here by sort of like just shorting this list of definitions. So maybe you should just put the
It
catch
does
on.
call out, it does reference the list in the vehicle code.
But it doesn't though, because it only said, it doesn't reference section 102 at all in the definition section.
The items that are in here are the ones that were believed to be issues
of
Yeah,
concern.
but the vehicle code is all or nothing in a sense, right? So that's just from a
Yeah,
legal
we could-
perspective. No, I'm just looking at it. If somebody gets a
certainly we could add that.
citation,
Yeah.
right, they're gonna go to a magistrate and they're gonna beat us in court because your definitions may not cover their issue.
Yeah.
According to the issue
I
that-
couldn't say I know that to be true or false.
Right, but when you're writing an ordinance, it's gonna become county law, it has to be consistent with the state law.
The ordinance is based on PennDOT's ordinance for
Right.
townships having ordinances for weight restrictions on roads.
I get that.
So it's based on their law. So it's, those definitions are from PennDOT.
It word for word,
I didn't compare them with the word. It's
Exactly.
from PennDOT.
I did, and they're very short. and brief. There are differences, so, you know, I think. we should check it out. Yeah, I mean, even if you just put in definition, C section, Title 25, definitions 102, I think you can go back and.
That might be covered in section 2. As amended, is intended to include and be subjected to all provisions of section 4902 of the vehicle.
Well, 4902 is a different subject.
Okay.
100, the 100 section is the defining part of the act itself, and the definitions are under 102.
Well, that is referenced in section 3. Like, for example, it says,
It doesn't explicitly say section 102.
it says one,
It says
101 or 102, I'm not sure.
101 is just the title of the act.
That squall means the whole act, the whole vehicle code.
Yeah.
From 101 through the whole.
Can we just look at the definitions?
So we have actually, we got this, this ordinance did come from PennDOT as a tried and true ordinance. So that's give us some comfort that it's been, you know, in use for quite some time. But, you know, we could, you know, council decides.
Remember, this is just for introduction of the ordinance as well. This isn't voting on it tonight. There's, you know, and also another thing just to add, this is supported by the municipality in which Honeywell Road is located. So.
I don't have a problem with the ordinance. I just have a problem that we do it right. Like, we're hanging our hat here on a 5-year-old study that when you read that report, it says there was no trucks in the week period with so many axles over, you know, basically a triaxle. So when we did that study in 18, there was no trucks like that. Now, it kind of looks like targeting.
Well, the study was to determine what the load rating was 5 years ago, which is the same as what it is today. So it's a study of how the road was built, what capacity that road could carry. That's what the study was created for.
And there was a traffic count too, correct?
There was traffic counts.
Yeah, that's what I'm speaking.
But a road is, when a road is designed, you determine what you're going to run over it, and that's what you design the road for, or, you know, what a safety factor, of course. But this process was to determine what that road could handle and keep us in a safe load area. So it might be more than what it is today, but it's not going to allow for the heavy loading that would occur with these two businesses, because there's another business proposed out there, a warehouse. So that's the basics of it.
Any other discussion? Motion and a second. Roll call, Ms. Lawrence.
This is to approve the ordinance.
No.
No, this is just to introduce the ordinance.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. LaScavitch,
No.
Mr. Lombardo,
Yes.
Ms. McDermott,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley,
No, because I think that we need some more amendments to this ordinance to make it more specific.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes.
Mr. Thornton,
No.
Mr. Urban,
No, because I think this needs to be cleaned up.
Mr. Lovett.
Yes.
Mr. Venus,
Yes.
it's introduced. 6 yes, 4 no.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. Number 2, motion to introduce ordinance amending the capital plan budget for the Luzerne County Sheriff.
You took that off.
One of
Oh,
your
no,
county
the
council.
new number 2. New number 2. Yeah.
Motion.
Motion by Ms. McDermott, second by Mr. Mitchell. Any discussion? Go ahead.
How much money is currently available in the capital plan?
There was 2 million unassigned.
Would you like to discuss putting ARP money towards this, or how much, how much is left to be attributed to this?
There's 9.5 million-ish for Ms. Booth's thing of ARP.
And that would be
money.
acceptable for this use?
I would rather capital. I think it's possibly acceptable. I think capital's cleaner. It's not just more available funding, it's easier to replenish capital. And I think council may have other uses for ARP, but again, it's council's decision. I'm just providing information. But I would say capital, but I'm okay being overloaded.
Any other discussion? Motion in a second. Roll call, Ms. Lawrence. Again, this is just to introduce.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. Venus?
Yes.
Mr. LaScavitch?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Motion passes. Motion to adopt the resolution approving the lease with UDU LLC for the Rose Tucker Active Adult Center located at 145 East Green Street, Nanticoke.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. McGinley, second by Mr. Venus. Any discussion? Roll call, Ms. Lawrence.
Mr. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. Venus?
Yes.
Mr. LaScavitch?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Next, motion to adopt the ordinance amending the 2023 fiscal year budget in order to deposit $109,601.98 into the reserve fund.
Motion, Venus.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Venus, second by Mr. McGinley. On the question, Mr. Thornton.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I recommend council vote no on this tonight and just put it off to the future. And I say that based on our county controller's recommendation. That's why we have the county controller here to offer this insight. And it would be poor accounting practices to allow this to be passed in this manner, or for that deposit to go forward. Specifically, also in addition to the fact that this department has overspent, as he said, up to 80% more than they should have. But it's to properly move this money, it should be done later in the year when the Baker Tilly audit is completed, and that would be somewhere in July or August, maybe.
June 30th.
June 30th is the final date, and then the report comes out in July. So I would recommend council vote no on this down, take care of this later in the year, as per our county controller's recommendation. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I have discussion. First of all,
Go ahead, Mr. McGinley.
as everybody realizes, this election happened last year. It's been paid for out of our funds from last year. The money came to us this year. I did check with Mr. D'Alessandro, who was our active finance director. He said, yes, that's something that could be done. And I asked him to check with the auditor, and they were okay. The money, if we put it in the reserve, if they need to have money out of the reserve, they have to come back to us. So if they're overspending, that's their issue right now. But if we give them $109,000, we're adding to that issue. So I think at this point in time, put it in the reserve. If they need it later on, they'll have to come back to council. That's why you have a reserve.
Thank you. Any further discussion? There's a motion and a second. Roll call, Ms. Lawrence.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Thornton?
No.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. Venus?
Yes.
Mr. LaScavitch?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo?
Yes.
Yes, one no. Passes.
All right. Next, we have nominations and appointments to council-related committees.
Property,
Light property.
redevelopment, authority representative.
Right. We only have one.
We still have to open nominations.
Okay, all right. Motion to open nominations.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nominations are open.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Mark Rabel.
Second. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nominations are closed. Motion to vote on Mr. Rabel.
So moved.
Second. I think Steve got it.
Okay,
Sorry.
roll call.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Lovett?
Yes.
Mr. Venus?
Yes.
Mr. LaScavitch?
Yes.
Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardo?
Yes.
Unanimous. Passes.
Congratulations, Mr. Ray.
All right. We'll now have public comment on non-agenda items. I have a couple here. Dolores Voda. Dolores. Yeah, that's right. Yep. Yep. VODA. Ma'am, you're from,
I hear it goes. Okay.
ma'am, you're from McAlpine Street in Duryea? Okay, all right, go ahead.
Take your time. Take your time. We're not in a rush.
Yes, I'm from McAlpine Street. Bought the house 2 years ago. And when we did, there was all these beautiful trees. And I just felt so relaxed there. And then one day they came with these machines and they just took these trees down and they never notified us or anything that they were going to do this. And now it's just barren. It's just, you go back there and you could cry when you see it. And I don't know how they could do that. I mean, how could they just come in and just take everything down without notifying anybody? And they didn't. They didn't say anything or anything. They just did what they wanted to do to us. And I just don't think that's right. I really don't. I mean, where is this country going that they could just take over anything like that from, like me, just a citizen, a government, you know, a government of America? They could just do that to the people that are not up class. They're just ordinary citizens. And I don't think it's right. I really don't think that they should have done this without notifying us or anything. I mean, how could you just do this to the people? And I'm very concerned about that. You know, it was one time just a beautiful, beautiful. I would go out there and I would just sit and it was just beautiful. And then they came along and I know they're big, you know, corporation and they could do anything with us, I guess. I don't know, but it's not right. It's just not right. And that's why I wanted to say something, you know. And legally, I don't think it's, you know, we're just ordinary citizens of an ordinary United States government. I believe in, you know, free speech and all that. And it wasn't done like that. It just wasn't done to us. We
Thank
were
you, ma'am.
notified.
I just have a
Go ahead, Ms. McDermott.
question. When you're, just so everybody knows, when you're saying they cut the trees down, who are they? Who are they?
Okay, what is the name of the court?
It's Copart.
Copart. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And all there is now is just machinery. I mean, it's just barren. It's just like going to the moon, I guess you would say, you know, there's just nothing there. And even the environment, I mean, the dirt, the oil, the gasoline, I mean, it's not good for you. It's not good for you to breathe that in.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
David Boda.
I'm David Voda, that was my wife speaking. We bought the house in 22, the middle of 22. I was under, they said that was gonna be like a reserve because of the animals. And that's, we love the property. I paid a lot for that because it was pricey at that time. Now it's gonna be depreciated, the property. The road is a state road, I believe. You can't have a junkyard, and they say it isn't, but they're saying it's gonna be storage. You put your cars in there, you're gonna have gas leakage, you're gonna have oil leakage, you're gonna have antifreeze leakage. You know, it's gonna pollute the ground, pollute the water. And I just, you know, it's gonna ruin the health of the people living there. That's what I wanted to bring into the attention, and if there is anything that could be done about it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Colleen McAndrew.
Great shirt.
Thank you.
6'4".
I just wanted, I've been there since '87 and loved it. Until one morning I woke up, had no clue. And it was actually the day after St. Patrick's Day. And I looked out my bedroom window and it was like a tornado went off. Like you have trees back there, you have woods back there. I have grandkids, I have children. My husband always loved to go back there. Now it's gone. Like there's nothing there. All I'm asking for is they put a fence up with something that we don't have to see back there, or accommodate us now for what they did to us. Because it's awful. They should have sent us certified letters. Not one person on McAlpine Street got a certified letter or any other letter. And they're saying they sent all of us letters. And it's just devastating. And that's why we're here. If there's something that could be done, I don't know, but it's not a pretty sight. So it's disgusting. There's so much dust now. I have allergies. It's awful. I can't even open a window. I don't even like going back there now. I have a pool, I have a deck. It's disgusting. And once that all gets going and all the gas and everything, we're doomed. We're done. My property now is gonna go right down. So if there's anything, we would appreciate it, because Duryea Borough doesn't want to listen to us. They're saying this is all legit. Well, if it's legit, why didn't we get anything? Thank you.
Mr. McAndrew, just a quick question, Brian Thornton. I did speak to a resident down there who I know very well. And I'm just trying to frame this for everybody in the room who's not familiar with it. Correct me though, if I'm wrong. Apparently, that entire property, she said was zoned or is zoned industrial property.
That's what they're saying.
Okay, and according, I don't know zoning rules and laws, and I don't know who would be responsible, whether it be Duryea or the county, I have no idea. Who would be responsible for sending those letters out, certified mail, to alert all the residents that that was coming, and that was proposed to that company coming in there and doing that. I think that's the issue that I don't think the issue is anybody's disputing that it's industrial zone land. I think they're disputing the residents that they never got notification.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
so that's the issue. And
That's the issue.
it is, I drove by there, it is horrible. to look
It's
at.
heartbreaking.
It's very heartbreaking and, you know, I've never been tabbed as a huge environmentalist, but, yeah, of course, all those woods and the animals. And
Oh, yeah, it's
wildlife that
terrible.
live there is now completely gone.
Yep.
And it's very sad and unfortunate. And I
Yeah.
sympathize and empathize with everybody who has to live down there. It's sad. Now, one thing I just want to ask, are all the properties of the residents, are they zoned residential
Yes,
along that track? Okay,
and they,
all right, I was just curious.
Yep.
All right.
So,
All
thank
right,
you.
Thank you.
John,
Go ahead, Mr. Liscavige.
so you said they're residential?
yes.
Okay.
We have any work.
Ma'am, just, Mr. Liscavige, what, can we give the rest of the members of the public that have slips an opportunity to speak? And then I want to have Mr. Jones come up and just give a little explanation if that's possible. And then we can have a discussion, whatever you guys want. Ms. Fisher, Lisa Fisher. Okay, go ahead.
Can I just pass these around?
Sure.
A bunch of information is in here about Copart. There's also the application that they had for the rezoning. They slipped in, they asked for a fence and also requested a variance to change the zoning on the property. The fence application was for 210 McAlpine Street, but the actual fence is going from rear 144 McAlpine Street through 200 McAlpine Street, and that's the 30 acres that they clear cut. So I'm asking for council to intervene on our behalf, McAlpine Street, my neighbors and myself, because I wasn't given an opportunity to speak at the council hearing. This is the list of the neighbors that were mailed notice of it. Nobody got one. They allegedly mailed it to my place of work, which I don't even know how they would get my work address instead of my home address where I own the home. So I'm asking for you to intervene on our behalf. Copart had 6 EPA violations in 22 alone. There are 5 other violations that are currently being heard elsewhere across the United States. They're all EPA. They paid over $1 million in one suit alone in California last year. They're all heavy metals that are contaminants that are coming out of these cars. The piece of land that they're using is being a salvage yard. These are going to be indefinitely stored. Cars are indefinitely stored. They don't drain the fluids out of the vehicles. So I'm pleading that council gets involved on our behalf to find a solution and help us find something. If you could do something with zoning, that would be great. But if not, maybe have some organization within the county go and spot check them, see that the vehicles are being drained, hold them accountable, because they have the water coming off of the driveway or the housing facility being pushed back further into the woods, which is all over mines. This whole area is mined. And it's going to later get into a body of water, which is going to drain right above the Lackawanna, which is going to get into the Susquehanna, and then later into the Chesapeake, which is already over toxic. So I'm just asking if you could intervene on all of our behalfs so that maybe zoning could reconsider the issue, or maybe zoning could spot check them. Because there is no building there to house these. Within that folder is what a salvage yard is supposed to do. They're supposed to be a fireproof building to take all the fluids out of the vehicle, how they're supposed to be stored. Shouldn't be seen from a state route, a salvage yard, rather than take your time explaining all of that, because I know I have 3 minutes. These are just the concern, because everything eventually gets into the groundwater, and it's some of these drinking water further downstream. Thank you for your time and consideration. And this is the list of the, and I didn't get any, nor did any of my neighbors that are with me tonight.
Thank you.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Fisher. Mr. Jones, would you mind coming up just in, I know that you have some interaction with these folks about this. If you could just give us the perspective of the county on this issue, if there's anything maybe that we're sort of missing, or a piece of the story that's not there, some communication that maybe we aren't aware of, or maybe they weren't aware of.
Yes. Hi, Council. Matt Jones, Director of Planning and Zoning. I would preface what I'll say here We received a number of inquiries about this from the local press and from folks in the neighborhood, and we've been providing this information throughout the past week. If we're talking about trees, I'm here with my 10-year-old kid who every evening I'd read the Lorax to, and we'd watch the Lorax movie. I'm the most bleeding heart progressive, sympathetic to the idea of conserving trees or planting trees on lands that we own for the environment and the natural benefits of those natural resources. In my capacity as planning and zoning director, I'm charged with adjudicating and enforcing and administering and sort of acting as a referee, if you will, the county zoning ordinance and the county land development ordinance that was enacted by the county commissioners in 1968 and reenacted by this council, the zoning code as late as 2021. And so I'm going to read some of the information that I've written up about the history of this case in particular. This case predated me. I was hired in August of 2020. This all played out before I came on the scene, but our office keeps very detailed records of what has happened. Duryea is one of 20 communities that we happen to provide zoning services for. The borough of Duryea, either through purpose or neglect, has not enacted its own zoning code and has relied on the county for zoning services and permitting as long as I know, as long as at least 1968, I believe, since zoning went into effect in the county. The site in question is comprised of 2 lots. There's an easternmost 15-acre lot at 210 McAlpine Street. And there on the western side, neighboring there is a 30-acre lot just to the west. Copart has, over the years, expressed interest in leasing or eventually owning those 2 pieces of land. On January 7 of 2008, Copart requested and was approved special permission in the form of a use variance from the County Zoning Hearing Board, which is a 3-member adjudicative body that's independent of my office. So my predecessor, the request would have come in for a permit, and that permit would have been denied for this application by Adrian Maroli, I presume. This was in 2008. Adrian Maroli was zoning director for, I think, 30 years and was in that office for 40 years as senior planner and zoning director. Anyways, in 2008, Copart requested a use variance in front of the zoning hearing board as an appeal to Maroli's rejection of the application. Their application to the board was to establish a storage and online auction members only vehicle selling operation for collision damaged vehicles. They sought to establish their business on the easternmost 15-acre piece of land, to erect an office trailer on site to establish that business, to store collision damaged vehicles on the site, and throw up an 8-foot tall fence along the perimeter of the site as however they felt they would like to have that 8-foot fence, as well as erect a business identification sign. The case was numbered A2650. Prior to the hearing, all neighbors within 100 feet of the site were sent on or about December 20th, 2007, certified mailers relaying details of the case and inviting them to the hearing if they wish to testify for or against the proposal. Back in 2008, it was the office's informal policy that we would send these mailers by certified mail. I have a collection of green certified mailers that were sent back to that office that we have in the case file that showed that many of these folks in 2008 received those mailers and signed for those letters and returned those letters back, returned those mailers back to our office. The notice of the hearing was published weeks in advance in the newspaper on December 24th and December 31st. No objectors showed up at that hearing. That hearing was held in this courthouse on a Tuesday night. The board decided to vote in favor of awarding the variances requested. Shortly thereafter, Copart pulled all of the necessary zoning permits for their trailer office and to erect their business sign. They pulled those permits on June 5th. Fast forward roughly 12 years. In 2020, Copart expressed interest in expanding their business to the neighboring lot to the west, the 30-acre lot. That lot is the lot that is closer to the residences along McAlpine, the 200 block of McAlpine. On July 7, 2020, Copart sought the same special permission under a use variance from the zoning hearing board to expand their business to that westernmost lot. They wanted to be able to store the collision damaged vehicles on the 30-acre piece as well as the 15-acre piece, to extend the 8-foot tall fence, and the board granted them that permission on July 7 of 2020. They granted that permission on condition that Copart present to the county a stormwater management report as to how they would accommodate excess rainwater that would be generated if there was additional graveling surfacing for expanded parking of these vehicles. How would the rain be collected on site and retained largely on site without excess runoff running onto neighbors' properties? Prior to the hearing, all neighbors within 100 feet of the site were sent and received on or about June 17, 2020, letters relaying details and inviting them to that hearing to testify if they wished. Neither state nor county law requires us to provide those notifications. It has been informal county policy and our offices and departments policy that we wish to notify neighbors of zoning hearings because of this kind of a situation. We want the neighborhood to be made aware of out-of-the-box applications being made for lands in our county. When it's under our zoning jurisdiction, we want the neighborhood to be notified in case they have an interest in the case, to be invited to testify. In 2020, we sent out mailers not certified. I don't know when the decision changed. It was prior to my coming on the scene as to when that policy changed, sort of informal policy, but I do have records, and I have a certification from the zoning clerk on staff that at least 25 letters were mailed to the same neighbors, to the same residences that were mailed back in 2008. Notice of that hearing was also posted in the newspaper in the Times Leader on June 18 and June 25 of that year. 30 individuals showed up at that hearing, which means that word got out for the other cases that were heard that night. Those notices would have been sent out by regular mail as well. 30 people showed up for that hearing for, I think there were more than 8 cases heard that night. At least 8 cases, if not 9 or 10. No one showed up to object to the Copart application.
Members of the public, Mr. Jones was respectful of you. Please be respectful of him.
As they had been ordered, Copart subsequently submitted their stormwater management plan to our department. It was approved, signed, and recorded by the county departments on November 3rd of last year. So we're talking this last fall. The plan called for installation of stormwater basins to mitigate the increased water that would otherwise flow off-site. If there is an intense storm event, the piping that leads to that storm basin, the storm basin is installed it's going to be installed in such a way that there is an overflow or excess water then drains into existing wetlands that are there on site. both the easternmost 15-acre lot and the westernmost 30-acre lot are currently and always have been zoned industrial. They have been zoned industrial since 1968. The site is the properties are the site of a former strip mine. And I would just point out, as sympathetic as I am to the idea that, you know, it was a strip mine, and then for some intervening years, trees were allowed to grow on that site. It became wooded, and now they're being torn down. I mean, presumably, now that they have all of their permits and approvals, Copart is looking to install the stormwater basin that they've been required to install to accommodate the rainwater. They are tearing some trees down, and they are going to be setting up their expanded parking area for their business. As difficult as it is to be the neighbor to that kind of development in terms of losing what was viewed as a more appealing character of the neighboring land. And again, my family owns property and it borders commercial and industrial lands. And it's forested right now, but the owner of that land could come in and do something else with it and tear those trees down. Would my family like that? Probably not. Would we turn out to testify at a hearing? Maybe, if we were invited. But I don't own that land. My family doesn't own that neighboring land. The use, this is kind of unsolicited commentary, but this use is undesirable to some, but it would be maybe considered relatively benign to some of the other uses that would be readily permittable in the industrial zone, no questions asked, under current county law. You could have a trucking depot located there that I would have to readily permit right out the gate. No special hearing would need to be held. It would be permitted by right. You could have bulk fuel storage facilities, or a manufacturing plant, or a distribution warehouse, or it could be mined again. So those are the uses that are readily allowed in that zone. If there's any questions, I'm here. Again, I regret to be the sort of face of explaining how this all played out. This did predate me, but I feel it's a responsibility as the zoning officer to explain the history of this upon you asking me. So I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. If you just don't mind maybe sticking around the meeting afterwards, just in case the members of the public
Would you like
might.
me to sit in the audience?
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Ms. McDermott, you have a question? for
Just a
Mr.
question
Jones?
about the 8-foot fence. The 8-foot fence,
Yes.
are they going to put that up?
My understanding is that they will, that they had put in their plan to erect the fence along their northern boundary line that abuts the residential homes there, as well as the easternmost lot, the northern side of the easternmost lot is where they're looking to put that 8-foot tall fence.
So is that adjacent to these properties?
Yes.
Okay,
So their plan is to put that fence up, is my understanding, and they have the permission to do that if they wish.
we don't know when the time frame on that would be.
I don't. They could erect it at any time if they wished.
But according to what was the agreement, that they had to put it up, correct?
They asked for permission to put it up. Our law says you're not supposed to put up a fence any higher than 6 feet. And we do not permit fences. People can throw up a fence on their property pretty much anywhere, unless it's preventing someone's being able to pull out of a busy driveway along a busy street. You can't block someone's view completely. That's one of our restrictions. Another restriction is that it shouldn't be higher than 6 feet tall unless you ask for special permission to put up a higher fence. And so that was asked of the board. It was rejected by the zoning office outright initially. It went to the board for special permission. The board granted them permission on 2 occasions. First for the easternmost lot, and then second, 12 years later, for the westernmost lot, to be able to put up an 8-foot tall fence if they wanted to.
Mr. Jones, with regards to the fence, you said the first one was 12 years later, the second fence was allowed. What's the time frame here? How long? Do you have any idea of how long ago this was when they gave them the permission to put up the fence?
Yeah, I have the exact dates. It was 2008, the first for the easternmost lot, and 2020 for the westernmost lot. And I could pull up the exact dates.
No,
if you give
that's
me a
all. I was
moment.
just looking for the year. I'm just curious because 2008, they haven't done it yet, so.
No, that fence is up.
Okay, oh, that one is up, so
2008
it's
one
just
is
the
up.
west that we're worried about.
Yeah, the western part is not up.
I have a question. I mean, just to be a good neighbor, do you think it would be possible to reach out to Cole Park, ask them where the houses abut the property to leave an area, like a strip, put some trees in there as a buffer? I think to be a good neighbor, it's not unreasonable request. And I'm familiar with Cole Park and all these places. I do want to correct something. They are not a salvage yard. They're a reseller of wrecked vehicles. There's a difference. They don't dismantle. So that being said, I can feel your pain, but one thing, when I was with Mr. Thornton on West Pittston Council, we ran into this subject, and I thought you did an excellent job, the way you did everything from start to finish. So that was terrific. But one thing we learned about, there's such a thing as mixed use, right? We dealt with it in West Pittston. Somebody comes in, they buy a property, next thing you know, they're putting a trucking garage in. Well, let me tell you what, you want to get neighbors excited on a street with houses, start running tractors up and down the streets. Unfortunately, the zoning sometimes dictates what the use is, and there was no change of use. They continued an operation. There was nothing we could do about it. As much as we didn't like it, we could not do anything about it. So I do feel your pain, but I guess the only thing I could say is going forward, because I know this other couple just purchased the house. I encourage everybody, whoever buys a home or a piece of property, to look at the zoning surrounding them. It's just a good practice because of this situation.
Mr. Mitchell?
These federal stormwater requirements make developers within a certain over an acre of land, they're trying to put in runoff controls around their construction sites. You know, if the developer has those controls implemented, in case there is a large storm and these residents are affected by runoff issues.
What, during the construction?
During construction.
For larger sized properties, that is administered by the DEP, I believe. For smaller sized properties, that is enforced by the Conservation District, if I'm not mistaken. So our piece was, what's going to be the final product? The zoning hearing board required them to have the stormwater plan developed, and presumably now they're implementing its construction. So the end result is that most of that rainwater will never escape. I mean, it may filter into the ground. I understand that there are possible lawsuits maybe filed in California at a Copart site out west about environmental issues. Environmental and erosion issues on that scale, those are in the wheelhouse of the state DEP. And possibly the Attorney General. They have an environmental violations investigatory office. And so I had a few folks call me on the phone asking me about this and what could possibly be done. Obviously, if I have a backyard garden and I have tomatoes growing and I garden, you know, you could park a car anywhere, but if you have a lot of cars, yeah, you might see some leakage, and I don't know what's leaking. If there's an environmental concern and you see something, I'd encourage folks to call their state DEP. That's out of my hands, but that would be the agency that has jurisdiction.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jones. If you just want to stick around after the voting session, just in case any, go ahead, Mr. McGinley.
Mr. Jones standing here. We have a motion on our next agenda that this type of development is coming up for a hearing. It's in certified mail.
We can certainly put that on the next agenda. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that makes more sense.
Yeah.
And you know, we proceed. And the other thing, two questions, Mr. Jones. Do we monitor those sites for zoning criteria that would provide the zoning?
We do the best we can with the staff of 3 or 4 that we have. If we get a tip off that there's a violation where someone's building something that has not been permitted yet, we have eyes and ears out there in the community with the borough, the towns that we work with. But if it's necessary, we will go and visit a site to inspect it to see if a violation is occurring. If someone's pouring concrete to build a building they have not yet been permitted for, we'll go and put eyes on the ground to see. If someone's building something on land that they don't own, we'll go out and see. Now, the recourse would be then the private landowner may have to hire a lawyer to make their own case. We have some ability in the zoning office to enforce zoning issues. Sometimes it gets to a higher level, or if someone's building on your property, something you don't want there. Like if, for example, Copart were to be building something or tearing down land way past their boundary line, folks might consider hiring a lawyer. That's the recourse available. I have some ability to issue fines, take a case to a magistrate and see fines issued, but there's only so much teeth that I have in civil law. I can't throw people in jail.
I would hope though, in light of what we've heard this evening, must be publicized. I think we should make a visit every once in a while just to make sure we follow all the guidelines. And I think you remember, if you were, I think Blue Chip was the developer down in Hazleton. It was a similar kind of situation. They were taking down trees and things. And they did put a fence up and they did put some buffers in it, shrubs, trees or something. So they did cooperate very much once it became a question. I think whoever brought that up, that's a good idea. Ask these people, hey, could you provide some kind of buffer so the neighbors aren't subjected to some of this?
Mr. McGinley, I greatly appreciate that comment. There's two ways it can be gone about. One is after the fact, when we have no ability to make them do it. We can ask them as kind neighbors, hey, can you leave some trees? Can you let some trees remain? Can you replant some trees to create an evergreen buffer? The other option is that the Planning Commission, at the behest of council, if you order us, we could devise amendments to our zoning code or our land development code that require buffers for plantings under certain conditions. It might become a controversial issue where some people are going to say, I don't want to have to be on the hook to plant trees. But if this body thinks it's the right idea to require new industrial development that's newly proposed under county law to have evergreen buffers planted or left to remain under certain conditions, that when new industry is developed bordering a residential zone, that's something we could plan for in the future so that we might cut off at the pass something like this happening again in the future. Now that may not help these folks right now with this situation and could be resented, but that could help diffuse problems in the future when we have the same kind of issue happen at other sites.
I don't disagree with you. We have a current situation.
Yep.
And maybe the soft approach to go to the developer, say, hey, we have an issue. We have a lot of people who are upset. We'd like to have a good neighbors situation. Here's what we're suggesting. And see if they comply or they will address it. It doesn't hurt because by the time we go through and change our ordinances and things, it's done.
Maybe that cycle event.
I don't know the specs on it. I know it's going to be 8 feet tall. That's about all I know.
Chain link with barbed wire.
A little better than a chain link with see-through. See-through. You can't make it do it. Think approach them and say, hey, this would be a better idea.
Looks like a prison.
I just know it's not. We have some communication with the existing people that live there and the building body. On the spec rate. They didn't have to do that, but we reached out.
Well, in the case file, I have an email from one of their agents that I could reach out to on your recommendation and see if they could, consider that. They could tell me to take a hike. We've done our level best to help them process their application. But, again.
If you want to pass me that information, I'd be more than happy to make a phone call just to say, hey, how would you like to be a good neighbor?
Members of the public.
I think, let's say take that. Nothing gained, nothing lost, right? But I think the approach to, in behalf of these people that have not spoken tonight, and other people looking at it, would be a very good gesture, huh?
Ms. Fisher, you already had your 3 minutes before. Okay, go ahead. You can ask your question.
Excuse me, how long is the permit open to get this, like, endless amount of time to do the work? Just wondering about how long the permit is.
That's for Mr. Jones.
There's no statute of limitation on it. They were approved to pursue the work last fall. And so presumably now they're working to install that stormwater basin.
They would pull their permit with Duryea, correct? Not zoning.
This is permitted and approved. The permits would be for the office building, which has already been permitted and erected, and the sign that identifies their business on site. And that's it. The sort of use approvals came in 2008 for the easternmost lot from the board. And then the zoning board approved 12 years later in 2020, the same usages for the westernmost 30-acre lot. So they have the approval to proceed. The stormwater management was the only sticking point that the board held them to. And the sort of extra assignment that they gave them, they said, we're going to approve this, but we want to make sure you accommodate rainwater without it flowing off all over the place. That was approved last fall and by our department. They sent it in, our engineers looked at it, they said this looks like it would work. And so since that's been approved in November, presumably now that the weather's breaking, they are looking to install that stormwater basin. And so they're tearing some of the trees out to provide for that.
Okay, just a suggestion, maybe we can put together a letter that we could send from council, not necessarily just from you, but maybe council, we could send a letter to, again, ask about doing an, what you say, an evergreen environmental buffer. Evergreen buffer.
Soft letter.
Yeah, just maybe if it came from council, it would be a little bit of more bearing.
That would be up to you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to do
We
that.
can certainly put that on our next.
I
agenda
can
if you'd like.
pursue it, but it might come with more weight if it came from your body.
Sure.
If
I think that's-
if there's a majority that agrees
I
on
think
that.
that's at the very least, that's something we can do.
If we could add that to the next agenda.
All right, yeah, we'll get that on. All right, we spent like 35 minutes on this, which I think is a fair amount of time. So if we can get, there's more public comments that have to be made. Thank you, Mr. Jones. We appreciate it. Richard Sparks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me time to speak. I represent West Hazleton Borough. I'm the fire chief for the borough of West Hazleton. We have a situation where the bridge that flows over Black Creek, located in our Valmont Industrial Park, had to be closed due to deteriorating conditions. My mayor will speak a little bit more on that after me. My concern is with public safety. The closure of the bridge greatly limits our ability to access and egress a big section of the industrial park, not only in West Hazleton Borough, but also a bigger section of Hazel Township. We're talking 50 businesses or industries and approximately 2,500 people that work in that section of the industrial park that are affected. My concern, again, with public safety is traffic has to be rerouted onto what's essentially residential streets that were not designed and built to handle that kind of traffic flow, especially with the truck traffic. God forbid we have a major emergency in the industrial park, whether it be a fire, a chemical spill or release, that greatly limits our ability to operate, to get emergency vehicles and personnel into the scene, as well as to evacuate residents and employees of the industrial facilities. Our borough, of course, works with a limited funding basis, and any help that we can get from the county
Certainly, this money is needed so we can get this project underway. Without it, we have no chance of getting the project started. I won't take up any more of your time. Appreciate our concern, appreciate my concern for public safety and well-being, and I thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
John Chura.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Chura. I'm the mayor of West Hazleton Borough. You just heard from our chief. We are here tonight to ask you to please strongly consider passing the grant for the borough to fix this bridge that we have a problem with. As chief explained, all of a sudden about when I first became mayor about 6 years ago, West Hazleton discovered we had a bridge. We owned the bridge and nobody ever knew this. And it is an industrial park. And one day there was the stream, one of the plants made dishwashing liquid. It went down the stream and it looked ridiculous. So DEP got involved. PennDOT came and the one wing wall on the bridge has moved, I believe, 36 inches away from its base. It's about a 25-foot high or 30-foot high wing wall. So we really need to get this project done. It's been a very long time. West Hazleton is small, like Chief Sparks mentioned. We do not have the funds to just do this project, or we would have a long time ago. But if you could help us out in any way, we really would appreciate it very much so we can get this project done. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mayor. Controller Griffith.
The issue of McAlpine Street is a real serious issue. I just was down there just recently. We're doing a tax collector audit down there in that area, and I was devastated when I drove down McAlpine Street, saw what I saw. I couldn't believe it. I looked to the right, to the left, going down through Avoca, and I went, what happened here? I never even realized they were doing that. So I certainly empathize with the people's issue that they have with that property. It would be nice if we could do a type of a liaison as the county to possibly do a town hall meeting with Duryea Borough and the county and have residents come and voice their concerns. And possibly the developer would listen to their plight and give them some courtesy and put that buffer in based on the residents' concern. And I think a town hall meeting would go a long way if we could get possibly Duryea Borough to get on board with that and have a town hall meeting with the developer from Copart, as well as possibly with our planning and zoning gentleman there, could go in and maybe, work to negotiate with those and get stack hands and get that project squared away so that people could get some kind of relief. Because it really is bad. When I drove down there, I thought to myself, you go out your back door, you're going to be in a field because there's nothing there. It's just all dirt. So they have no safety net at all there. So I certainly understand their concern. So that might be an avenue for the county to possibly proceed with Duryea Borough to have a town hall meeting with the people to discuss their concerns with the developer. The other concern that I have is on the work session agenda is the issue with number 4 with the paper ballots. This is a real problem. When I read in a newspaper again, and I was at the Board of Elections meeting, and I read in the paper that people who vote at the polls and overvote will get their ballot back. I think that is a horrendous issue. Now, in speaking to the operations manager before the meeting, I was informed that if you put your ballot through the scanner and it comes up with an error on the screen that says the ballot is not correct, it's overvoted, you'd push the button to reject the ballot, you will get your ballot back. And then you could spoil it and revote. The concern I have with that is most of the people in this county vote by mail. They don't get that option, myself included. I'm going to vote by mail. I don't get that do-over. If they're going to say that if you push that button, you're casting your ballot on the scanner. Well, you know what? We allow people to do their ballots if they miss their date is mail-in. As a mail-in voter, I think everybody who's a mail-in voter will be very, very upset if the people who go in the polls mark 7 and they get a chance to do over, and the people who mark 7 as a mail-in don't get that option. I think it's a big decision for this council to make. I think once the ballot is cast, it's cast, your vote counts, that race is canceled, and that's what the law says. That race is canceled. You don't get do-overs. The ability for us to give people who walk in there a do-over cannot happen.
Thanks, Mr. Griffin.
You're welcome.
Anybody else for public comment in the audience? Go ahead, Ms. Callen.
Diane Cowman, Kingston. 2 weeks ago, you, as a council, voted and approved a motion to accept Mr. Mitchell's plan for the ARPA grants with the parameters set for the financial awards. The impression that was given at that time was that, well, that I know that all of those awardees have to resubmit a budget. And the impression that was given that it was a pretty simple task to have booth management reopen the portal so that we could resubmit those budgets. Last Tuesday, not having heard anything, I reached out to Ms. Booth, and she said that I would be receiving something by the end of the day on Wednesday. Friday, I had still not received anything, and at that time, she told me that she had to wait for council's direction. So I've kind of been upset about that, obviously, and feel like we're continuing to get a bit of a ringer, runaround, excuse me. I then see that it's on the work session about renewing their contract, booth management. And of course, that will be discussed shortly. But I also think, if I'm correct, that they're still under their initial contract until May at some point. And if that is correct, then why are we not moving forward? Why is it 2 weeks later and meeting after meeting and things are continued? We finally voted and it was a final decision, and we still have not received anything from booth management on moving forward. And it's very upsetting. Many of us have projects that are on hold, and it's just something significant that needs to be addressed. And finally, answers need to be given on when this is going to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kalman. I know Ms. Booth is on. We're going to speak to her during the work session. That is one of the questions that I have for her. I know that the only thing that I could possibly think that she'd be referring to is a letter that myself and the chair of council were supposed to have signed, which we did sign that last week, or at least I know for a fact I signed it. I think Ms. Radel came into the office later that day and signed it as well. So I'm not sure what occurred in the interim, but we'll discuss that with her.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else, public comment in the audience? Mr. Knapp?
Ron Knapp from Nanticoke. As Controller Griffith mentioned, for mail-in ballots, and if there is an overvote, I would ask the press to publish this in the press on a weekly basis to make sure that the public are aware if there's that many mail-in voters. This is very important for all of us candidates running for office, that they are crystal clear, made aware of their ballot possibly not being accepted because of overvoting. I think that we have to get the message out crystal clear, because there's a lot of work involved with running for office, and a lot of monies in contributions, and the candidates investing for a better community around us. I would hope that there would be some kind of measure that it would be published on a weekly basis up until the election, that accuracy is ever important with regards to mail-in balloting, because you don't want to have your vote rejected for the people that are really striving hard for the people of this community. That's what I'm asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp. Anybody else in the audience, public comment? There's a couple people. Go ahead, Mr. Grantee. Yeah, he was in the first.
Just a quick comment. My name is Joe Grantee from Plains. Along with the problems with the land being cleared in Duryea, since you're going to try and work with Copart, you may want to try and get some kind of noise fencing there, because they have some heavy equipment that makes a lot of noise. They carry cars, multiple cars at one time. So it's pretty big equipment. And if that's going on right behind your pool, you know, you may want something there. So if you're going to go there and try and get something done for the people of Duryea of McAlpine Street, I'd add that in.
Thank you, sir. We have a couple people on the Zoom right now. A very concerned resident, please state your name and your municipality.
Joseph McCabe, Laughlin, Pennsylvania.
Go ahead, sir.
As for Copart, there's already IAA in Jenkins Township on Thompson Street. So, I mean, a facility like this has already existed in the area. So, I mean, that's already the template for the area. So there's already one set up. But that's not my question. I got two questions from the election board meeting last week. I believe Denise Williams said that somebody in county management actually made the decision not to use the Dominion machines based on monetary reasons. I'd like to know who actually made that decision not to use the Dominion machines based on financial reasons. Does anybody have an answer for that?
We'll have a discussion with the election board during the work session. They might be able to provide some information about that, but I mean,
will that be
if you'd
tonight,
like-
Mr. Lombardo? Is that tonight?
Yeah, the elections director is here.
All right, since my time's running out, there was another issue with the election board meeting. It sounded like they're bypassing state contracting laws by with the Matheson contract to move equipment and supplies from polling places from the bureau office. It sounded like they were using the contract from last year because of laziness or incompetence. And I don't know what the monetary value of that contract with Matheson moving is, but to use a contract that was awarded last year, just because they were the only vendor, well, it might not be the only vendor this year, so that should have been published. So it sounds like incompetence at the county level. I'm not quite sure if anybody's familiar with that situation, but it was discussed at the election board meeting.
Okay, we can discuss that at the work session as well. Any other comments, or is that it, Mr. McCabe?
That's all, Mr. Lombardo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ben Herring.
Hi, good evening. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Lombardo. Good evening, Luzerne County Council. I want to kind of piggyback off what was just said. So as you guys can tell, and I know
Mr. Herring, what town are you from?
Duryea.
Okay, thank you.
So you guys have heard this many, many times. I know I'm preaching the choir here. The entire voting situation, it continues to go unanswered, and that's why residents such as myself continue to call in to see if we're ever going to get any kind of really reconciliation. I want to draw attention to the gentleman before from the zoning director. I mean, that type of reconciliation and thoroughness that he gave tonight was fantastic. He had all of his facts, all the details were laid out. I commend him for what he's doing. I wish everybody in Luzerne County that was employed by Luzerne County actually had the same pedigree he did. We'd be in a much better spot. When we ask questions about the voting situation and what happened, especially during the midterm elections, I understand there's new personnel. I'm hopeful for that. But we usually get told that it's an ongoing investigation and nothing can be shared. Now, there's usually scope to an investigation, but I believe that what's happened with the county is that every single piece of the issue becomes, quote, under investigation. I want to ask one question. 2 weeks ago, down in Washington, D.C., there was a report. It seemed to be a Microsoft Word document, nothing that looked anywhere near official, that was given to the Democrat ranking member, and it basically defamed Alyssa Fusaro. And that's been ongoing for months. So we get no answers on the real issues at hand, yet we continue to see these smear tactics and defamation. So as the council that is, overseeing the manager and the county employees per se, why can't we find out answers to this? Who sent the Democratic chairman, or excuse me, the ranking member, some investigation, which you guys always say, we can't tell you anything, it's under investigation. Who shared some Mickey Mouse investigation with Congress? That needs to be found out, because I'm filing a ethics complaint already. And I'll finish with this. Even though I come on these meetings and I speak, that's not all I do. I take action as well, and I'm going to. So if this defamation is not corrected, there will be a lawsuit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. Mark?
Mr. Chairman, this is Mark Rabo of Hazleton speaking.
We can hear you, Mr. Rabo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. To all of council, I'd like to say, with regards to what the West Hazleton mayor, borough mayor said about what transpired several years ago with regards to a plant that there was actually, I believe it was the Dial Corporation that had soap. They were making soap, and there was a heavy rainstorm, and the overflows from the rainstorm caused the soap, I guess the formulation for the soap that they were making to go into Black Creek, thus causing a very sudsy situation, to say the very least. So I remember that very well. And I wholeheartedly agree with the West Hazleton Borough Mayor that the county should assist in that if they can. And I would like to echo what was said about Mr. Jones's presentation, as eloquent and articulate and spot on as it was. I hope that he would also convey to council as far as the water infrastructure that's going to be upgraded for the Hazleton City Authority for the water distribution network, which was not considered, by the way, for the ARPA money, which is a serious issue, to say the very least. With regards to the election, I would echo what Mr. Herring said with regards to what was submitted, because if you remember when that issue was submitted, that complaint, it was submitted to the Human Resources Manager and then spread on to the Office of Law, which is not in compliance with the County Administrative Code. The council is supposed to initiate investigations and inquiry according to the charter. So who was the person that submitted that when it was a bogus investigation that wasn't in compliance with the County Administrative Code nor the Home Rule Charter? That should be looked at. Okay. And also, lastly, I'd like to say, Mr. Chairman, with respect to the ARPA money, I found out tonight at Hazleton City meeting that the combined sewer system is for the $1 million, along with the joint sewer authority for line separation and the inlet. So I just wanted to make council and the management aware. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rabo. Anybody else for public comment on the Zoom? Anybody else for public comment in the audience? Mr. Thorne, go ahead.
Before we break, there's no other comments. I brought in Easter chocolate there. That's for everybody in the audience to hit during the break.
All right, thank you. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
All right, all in favor?
Just the audience?
All right, meeting's adjourned.
Or do you want somebody else?
We'll start the work session at 7:55. Yeah.
What's up, Coach? Coach, I'm gonna get you moved to number one. You got me. How you doing? How you doing? Sorry about your dad. Thank you.
Stop fighting with people.
I'm gonna fight with you next.
You'd be a lot worse.
That's quick, right?
Yeah, he just last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I saw him one day and he seemed to be great.
Yeah, he was back.
Yeah, how about that? Black eye. No, I got my bump.
He was back to himself for
Yeah.
a second.
Yeah.
And then
I was shocked.
I think when you have an amputation,
the strain on everything you do is harder.
Everything changes.
So when you have a heart, they said, the doctor said, it's like 50%
We're gabbing.
All right, I'd like to call the work session to order at 7:57 PM. All right, we've already had the Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silence. Roll call, please, Ms. Lawrence.
Mr. Venus.
Present.
Mr. LaScavitch.
Here.
Ms. McDermott.
Here.
Mr. McGinley.
Present.
Mr. Mitchell.
Here.
Mr. Perry.
Here.
Mr. Thornton.
Here.
Mr. Urban.
Here.
Mr. Lovett.
Here.
Mr. Lombardo.
Here.
10 of 11.
Okay, any additions or deletions from work session agenda?
I'd like to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Mr. Lombardo,
Yeah.
I'd like to move number 7 to number 1. Here, Monday, hour and a half.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, number 7 moved to number 1. Any other additions or deletions?
Mr. Lombardo, since we're going to be discussing the West Hazleton Bridge, and that's an ARPA project.
Yep.
I would like to add to our ARPA discussion, DAMA projects.
Okay, do we want to add it as a separate number?
Whatever, whatever is convenient.
Okay, let's just add it as number well, it'll be number 8 now.
Okay.
Okay with everybody?
9.
Yeah,
9, okay, I'm sorry. I don't do math.
We didn't delete anything.
Okay, all right, number 9. All right, anything else? Motion to adopt the agenda?
Second.
Who's the first? Mr. Milovich, second, Ms. McDermott, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, agenda is adopted. Okay. Hold on a second, district attorney report, that and the controller annual, that was from last time, right?
Sorry, yep.
Okay, all right, I was gonna say.
I was nervous on one of them.
All right. Okay, so we'll start out with Mr. Moses.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you, council, for taking me out of order. I'm here to represent the Northeast Pennsylvania Hospital and Education Authority. Janet Golsky is here to represent King's College. King's College came to the Hospital and Education Authority and to ask us to finance a project for them. It's a straight refinancing from the 2014 bank loan that the college did. They'd like to move from a variable rate to a fixed rate. They'd like to use the Northeast Pennsylvania Hospital and Education Authority as the conduit so that they can issue tax exempt, tax-free bonds. As you are aware, the authority met. The authority passed a resolution to proceed. We had a TEFRA hearing in this very room yesterday. No one attended the TEFRA hearing, but the minutes of that TEFRA hearing could be provided to you if you'd like. We're asking council to consider on the 25th a resolution adopting the project since it is consistent with the health, safety, and welfare of Luzerne County, and it's consistent with the bylaws of the authority since King's is a 501c3 and it is an institution of higher learning. And these projects have no liability on the county. The county's indemnified. The authority is merely a conduit for the project, so that the Internal Revenue Code requires that you go through municipal authority to get tax exempt status for the bonds.
Any questions?
So the only reason county has to approve that is to get the tax-free status. Yeah, okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you
Moses.
guys very much.
Short and sweet, we like it, thank you. All right, number 2, discussion regarding resolution authorizing use of ARP funds to enter into a subsequent contract with Booth Management Consulting for ARPA grant management services. Mr. Swets.
Mr. Majakis will speak to that.
Okay.
Good evening, council. Administration recommends that council enter into a consultant contract for years 2, 3, and 4 with Booth Management Consulting for the provision of ARPA administration grant management services. Booth is nearing completion of the first year contract and continuing services suggested. As to not hold the progress, to ensure that all federal compliance requirements are met. Also, consultant continuity will be extremely beneficial. Counties are audited. If you have any questions, myself, this meeting will be happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions by members of council for Mr. Majakis or Ms. Booth? Mr. LaScavitch?
So I guess when this whole thing started, I was a little taken back that this $908,000, this fee for the next few years. but is it possible we could seek other quotes?
Can you speak up?
Oh, Mr. Liscavige, can you speak up a little bit? I guess some people.
Is it possible to seek any other quotes for this 2, 3, and 4 and not use Booth since we had so much trouble with year 1?
I believe my understanding is that the administration is asking for Booth again, just for continuity purposes. But
So-
that, I mean, obviously, we're the ones that are approving it, so. the
I
discussion
think it
is-
wouldn't hurt to get another price with the issues we had just with the portal. I think it was a very trying time, to say the least. And then in the end, we ended up paying, what was it, $350,000 for something we never used. Anyhow, the whole scoring thing went right out the window. We used nothing except for a list. So
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. McDermott.
How, did we expend all of that money? Are we at the 350,000 threshold?
I believe there's about $21,000.
Mr. Thornton.
Yeah, I recall last year back when we discussed bringing on booth management and ultimately voting for them. I don't recall at all anyone mentioning that coming up 8, 9 months later was gonna be a $900,000 to $1 million addition to that contract. We're all led, I know I was led under the impression that that 350,000 covered their contract, because she talked about 24, 2025, 2026. This is what's gonna happen. These are the dates, the deadlines. I was under the impression that covered 350, covered all those years. It would have been nice if someone mentioned that, oh no, in about a year, you're gonna have sticker shock, because we're gonna ask for almost another $1 million. That would have been nice to know. Secondly, and so right now, based on what we experienced the past 9 months with booth management, and it's nothing personal, but I mean, we all had major issues with evaluating the 100 and some projects. I remember one weekend, I had access to John Lombardo's portal. I could have voted all the projects on behalf of John Lombardo. I even texted him or called him and said I already did that, even though I didn't. But I know Mr. Liscavige did not have access to 3 out of the 5 or 6 portals. I lost access on the last portal. I don't have a very high level of confidence in booth management. I just don't. There were a lot of errors made along the way. And worse than that, when the errors occurred and we made Booth aware of it and this and that, the resolutions weren't forthcoming right away. The answers and the fixes weren't forthcoming. Rather, the portal would expire, and I know Mr. Liscavige couldn't grade anything yet, and then it happened again. And so I don't have a very high level of confidence, nothing personal. I just look at everything like we do in the private sector. We look at performance, expectations. If they lack, they're not there. I could never support another $900,000 going to the organization. I really think, you know, because even though this is coming from federal taxpayer money, nonetheless, it's taxpayer money. I think we owe it to the taxpayers of the world, the country, and this county to seek other proposals. Look, there's 67 counties in the state. They used a plethora of other consulting companies to do this administration. Some counties did it on their own, you know, and they saved a lot of money by doing so. And lastly, I just want to echo what Mr. Liscavige said. In the end, we scrapped their whole plan anyway. We paid the $350. We didn't use their evaluations. We didn't use the scoring system. We should have just day one taken all the applications like Mr. Mitchell did at the end and give money out to everybody. You know, I voted against that plan, but I didn't think that was the right thing to do. The needs of every single one weren't the same. They should have, in my opinion, not all received that money. But I can't support this, and I encourage the administration to seek other proposals. Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell. And then Mr. McGinn.
With both management, we do have liability protection, correct? So if there's an issue with the grant going down the road, you know, we come across an issue and the federal government tries to reclaim that money, we have protection under the consultant's care. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yep.
And if we were to get another consultant, would their liability cover what Booth had already consulted on?
We'd have to see what their contract says. I would imagine that since they didn't do the whole project, that they're going to be somewhat hesitant about anything that happened before they got involved.
Mr. McGinn.
Respectfully disagree with that, but go ahead.
Mr. McGinley.
I have several items I'd like to mention, if I may.
Go ahead.
First of all, the first thing that I think began this project and made it a failure was the list of projects with funding being published. I don't believe that should have been done without somebody reviewing it and making sure that this was what council wanted to do. Not management, not Booth, council wanted to do. Number one. Number two, the gentleman on the other side here indicated all the computer glitches that we went through. It's just not right if everybody doesn't have the same opportunity to score these projects that were presented. Somebody also mentioned the evaluation system. Unfortunately, it failed. You know, we had a number that we were supposed to meet, that not one project met that number. Not one project of the 140 odd projects. Just didn't work. Mr. Mitchell, you know, I had to do a lot of work, and there's some other people participated, you know, to come up with a procedure that was totally different than what we started with. But we had to do something in order to get the process done. One of the major things that I really was upset with, and is the 5 missed projects. We went through and supposedly scored everything. And then all of a sudden, you know, Ms. Lombardo, a couple other people said there's 5 projects that weren't evaluated. Now we go ahead and evaluate those projects, knowing what the other projects were. That just was not right. It doesn't match up. And now I've been getting calls from people, and they're saying, this council goes send out award letters. I never heard that before. And now all of a sudden, we, council, is responsible to do that. That was one of the big issues we had right along was Ms. Booth. At one time she was talking to administration, one time she was talking to council, but there was never a cohesion there. And I think this is a major issue. How can we support $900-some-thousand to a consultant that we were not successful with? I'm not, you know, I know that they're legitimate. I know that they've worked on other projects, but right now, based on what they've done with us, I think it's very difficult to even consider going forward.
We do have Ms. Booth on the Zoom with us. Ms. Booth, I'm sure you've heard some of that commentary. Would you like to respond to any of that? You know, one concern that I have is just making sure that going forward, if we do support this contract with your organization, that, you know, we're going to do our best to make sure that some of these issues don't occur again, because a lot of them were very problematic for us. They really put council in a bad spot, both publicly and you know, personally for each council member in some cases. So, you know, we just want to be, at least I do want to be assured that we're going to have, you know, a positive relationship going forward.
So if I could respond, thank you. I appreciate all your comments and feedback. I guess I'll start with the beginning of the relationship. Myself and Councilman McGinley had a very in-depth conversation about the fact that this was for $350,000 for the first year with the assumption of 30 projects. He actually added that to the resolution for the signature on the contract, that it was year 1, 350, and we would go take it from there because there was concern about the number of projects. The entire evaluation process. So we processed 151 applications. We had not one complaint, one concern from any of the general public who who had to access the portal and process the applications. 151 uploading documents, thousands and thousands of pages of documents. If you go back to the origin of the evaluation process, I strongly discouraged you all from being evaluators. And I said, because your experience doing grants management is very, very important. This is not an easy task to be an evaluator. The council elected to evaluate. This is the only council that I've worked 28 counties. I've never had the council evaluated. So we tried to do training. When we came up to the training, we tried to explain the evaluation process. So the fact that the scores did not meet up to what the parameters was largely in part because maybe as it's not something you've done for a living, and it's not that easy. It's a skill set to do that, and it's based on a lot of experience. I also want to mention that when it came to, if you go back to the beginning, we initially suggested that y'all use a range of awards. We gave you a kind of breakdown based on the eligible activities, and you all decided, and this was from the pre-application process. We took the pre-applications, we came up and we said they're falling in these buckets. We recommended a range from X dollar to X dollar. You all decided that you didn't want a range, and that's fine. So even with Mr. Councilman Mitchell's plan, that was actually proposed early, not the same plan. I'm not suggesting the caps, but that you consider a range, and that was rejected. Now, what you just said about these project files, you all have solid project files, whether it's with our client, with our firm or not. So you had to get every document that was submitted through that portal. You have to have that in your project files. So to suggest that there was no need to go through that project file process, it's just absolutely not in compliance with the federal government. I was in front of Office of Management and Budget this morning going over some of the challenges with these ARPA files and these frauds and this conflict of interest and all of the concerns from the Office of Inspector General and the Government Accounting Office. And one thing I will tell you, at least from an eligibility determination, a budget determination, a pre-award risk determination, your files are complete. So to suggest that that process wasn't necessary, that's really where you put the council in risk. Not getting that. You all couldn't have just taken applications and said, oh, let's give it to everybody. You have to have in your file every document we review. You have to have it, even the determinations. So it wasn't a waste of your $350,000 based on 30 projects. Now, when it came to the technology, and I accepted the whole 5 applications, even though it is so, when you have revolving grant applications are submitted constantly. You're going to get more applications. Whether it's with our firm or not, you're getting other projects that we have to do that'll need this determination. So to suggest that those last 5 somehow was catastrophic, I accept that the electronically you all didn't see that. I accept that, and I accept the responsibility. But we corrected it as soon as the council gave us direction. One of the things I will agree on is that we probably should have had more communication with the council as far as email traffic, as far as communication, and not just with whether the prior county manager or the active county manager. You brought up the issue about the awards letter. I originally had sent the awards letter to the acting county manager to sign, to Brian, and he told me that the council needed to sign. That wasn't a Robin. I didn't make that determination. We sent that out to get the award letter signed. I don't make any decisions. I just follow directives, whether it's your directive or the county. So that information, once again, that's just not accurate information. That's the information you have. I guess I'm clearing the slate. So when I said to one of your residents that, oh, I should know by Wednesday afternoon, that was because I was assuming the letter would be signed and I would have it back, and then we can just send it out and initiate it. I respect whatever decision the council makes. I take responsibility for our issue, but when you look at, I will tell you, when you look at your files and your compliance with the federal regulation, we just had the city of Columbus, the actual mayor gave us an accommodation because of our files, got them through external audit. So you may doubt us now, but trust me, you're fine. What we did will withstand the test of time, whether we're here or not. And just understanding that that was a very arduous process. The council took it on. We processed 151 applications without an issue, but we couldn't get past the 11 councilmen doing evaluations. We had 2 councilmen. We didn't have any, I didn't hear any issues. Mr. McGinley, we stayed on the phone with you for hours going over the applications, hours. And that wasn't because the technology didn't work. We went with people's comfort levels. We've answered emails. We've answered telephone calls. We respond to all of the communications. Your internal projects. We've actually helped with solicitations. It's so much that we've done as a part within this 350,000. So I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity, at least to bring up from our perspective what we see. It's unfortunate that you believe our services haven't been satisfactory. It's unfortunate that you feel like you've, based on the comments there, that there's concerns about your ability to rely on us go forward. I will say though, and I will stand firm, I'm not concerned about litigation. I'm not concerned about insurance, because I know for a fact, Luzerne County is probably more protected than it'll ever be when it comes to the federal guidance regulations, even protecting you from yourselves. And that's just being candid. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Booth. Any members of council or Mr. Swets, Mr. Majikis?
I'd just like to ask a question here.
Go ahead,
When I was
Mr.
reading
McGinley.
through for the agenda submittal, it says the administration's intent to negotiate. Are we negotiating a contract, or do we have an offer?
We have an offer.
Did you negotiate?
We did not negotiate.
There was no negotiation.
There was an offer for year 2, and my suggestion was if we're going to go in front of council to have multiple years. To Mr. Thornton's prior point, I thought it was clear, not of the additional charges, but that the first contract was year 1. I don't think anyone realized the amount of time it would take or the number of applications. So what was brought to me was year 2, and it was my recommendation that if they're going to do the project, they complete the project, not go in front of 3 different councils.
The word negotiate should not be in that agenda submission.
And if I could clarify, it's not 900,000 over a year. That's over 5 years and 4 years. And if you look at the fee structure, it dramatically increases the year 3 and year 4, dramatically. It's just that based on the number of applications and the level of management, I'll just give you an example. Mr. Bellarmin from LCT, he just submitted his request for reimbursement. It's 400 pages. We have to look at each document to make sure it's sufficient documentation for his request. It's 400 pages for one request, one time. So there's a lot of documentation that they've submitted and have to submit to get these, when it comes time for the request for reimbursements. And that's just Miss Kathy Bednarek. Her documentation is over 200 pages for her request. So sometimes I think, and rightfully so, it's not an understanding of the level of effort it takes to even do something like process one request for reimbursement.
Go ahead, Mr. Herman.
I mean, listening to this objectively speaking, I mean, I'm hearing a couple different things, I think, part of the failure is also on council's part in the beginning, not defining, the caps, the limitations that I had mentioned initially, right, and the buckets. I can't blame Ms. Booth for that. I blame ourselves for that. I mean, I had mentioned it to all of you as my colleagues, and you guys chose not to do what she said to do. I'm looking at stuff now. I mean, I'm looking for the information, obviously. I've written 3 emails this past week, and I understand why we probably didn't get any sense of direction. That, Sheriff Radel, I mean, obviously got married. I was unaware of that. And things are seemingly stalled in a process here. But because one person is out, we should offer some sense of direction. I mean, I still want all the applications opened up so I can re-review them, look at look at them objectively and do some more diligence on them, because I caught mistakes in there, potentially fraud in there with signatures and issues. You know, and I want to take the proper action against certain entities if necessary. So I'd like that portal open back up for at least council to be able to look at all of this stuff from a financial perspective, because I don't want anybody getting sued at the end, you know, I mean, or going to be litigated. I think, you know, council too, I mean, put themselves in a predicament. You know, I know Ms. Booth, I think she protected herself by sending out her own process and threw it back in her face. Okay, and that's just saying it mildly, to say, here, you agreed upon a process in the beginning, and this is what you decided on step by step. You know, and with Mr. Mitchell's plan, it got thrown right out the window. So it's not on her, it's on us now. You know, and then people voting on conflicts of interest, you know, on a single resolution, that was a one up or down vote. There's no asterisk, like I said, on a single resolution, that you cannot abstain from a certain entity on a single resolution. That would have been no different on that lease tonight, where it was $1,000 more a month. And Steve Urban says, yes, but I don't like the extra $1,000. So I want to reduce the amount of that lease per month by $750 without any type of amendment process. But I'm voting yes on it anyway, but I want the lease to be $750 a month instead of $1,750. I mean, so I think, you know, some of you put yourself in a predicament with conflict of interest under federal guidelines, under Title II, I think it's CFR 200.318. And you may need to look at that, because that was a single resolution. And I saw the minutes, and I really don't agree with the way the minutes were written up, because you cannot abstain on one single bill. I don't know any legislative body, whether it be the State House or the US House or the Senate, where a proposal goes in front of them and they say, well, I'm going to vote yes, but not on these 3 items within the bill. So I think you put yourself in a predicament. But regardless, I think, you know, Ms. Booth is doing due diligence. I think she's looking for some general direction from county manager, from us. You know, I'd like to get that information opened up immediately. I mean, we need to give her direction and say, hey, yes, open it up to us. You know, I mean, when are we going to do that?
I don't have a problem personally with having the applications reopened for read only like we did,
Right.
you know, prior.
I want to be able
That's
to
no problem.
download all those things. I mean, it's over now. The process is over. We threw out the entire merit-based process that she recommended and went with, you know, a participation trophy for everybody at a reduced rate. You know, I can't, you know, I'm wondering how many projects we actually jeopardized because we reduced the amount of the award for certain entities that were on a larger scale. And you know, I think we got to look at that too, because did we cause a possible or potential failure in the project getting off the ground because we took money back, or we took part of it back, and we may have to recapture that at that point, put it back in the pot and dole it back out in another form. So these are all questions in my mind that have been like brewing for the past couple of weeks. You know, and we did things haphazardly, I think, too quickly without a serious discussion, work session. And then we took a vote just for expediency sake to get the money out the door. But really, I mean, there's still an award letter process there. I know she's got a lot of work. I don't know where we go from here, besides starting to communicate with each other a little bit more effectively on certain projects.
Mr. Thornton, then Mr. Penis.
Just 2 things. One is, I am very concerned and I'm bothered by the fact that no member of the public has been able to view or see any information on all of these applications that we approved. Now we're ready to maybe send award letters out, giving money out to all these entities, and nobody in the public has been able to see what entities, what they're asking for, how much money, and what their project is. Council doesn't even have access to that information. I don't know why we don't. It'd be like a member of the US Congress seeking information from a committee, and the committee says, we're not going to give it to you. We're only going to give it to the Speaker of the House. We're not giving the councilman on oversight or whatever. We're not going to give that information or that congressman. So I think it's so wrong that we're at this point now, this advanced stage, and no one's been able to really look into, the public especially, where we're doling all this money out. Secondly, I just want to say, because this was not, I did not have the opportunity at the vote 2 weeks ago. The motion that was presented on the floor for council to vote on all of those projects was severely flawed. Now, I'm not talking about the projects I disagreed with. The way the motion was structured was flawed. It was an all or nothing. Either you had a vote in favor of every project or you voted no on every project. So whereas I would imagine all 11 council members should have had at least one project out of the 115 or whatever we voted on, should have had one that they didn't agree with. The motion, the way it was structured, forced us to vote for all the projects at one time. So whereas I didn't agree with maybe a dozen or 15, and I stated it on the question, the way the motion was structured forced council members to either vote for projects they did not support, or we had a vote against projects that we did support. And that left me no choice. I had to vote no on all the projects when in fact I supported over 80 or 85% of them. And I had to vote no on them because I didn't have an option the way the motion was structured. So I just want to get that out there. That was ill-fated the way that was designed. It was not efficient, and it did not really result in the true sentiment of this councilman's feelings on those applications. Thank you.
Mr. Thornton, you didn't have to vote no on that. If you agreed with 85% of the project, you could have just said, okay, I don't agree with 20, but I'm going to vote yes for the greater good.
You can't do that.
I wouldn't have, that's what I did. I certainly didn't agree with some of the projects, but
So you had to vote for them.
I happily voted for them because I agreed with 90% of them.
You can't-
I mean, I just don't see why,
That's what I.
I mean, I wouldn't be willing to say, oh, Ms. Kalman, I disagree with your project, and then face her and say, because she went through the whole process and yeah, she was awarded, that I would be the one to vote no, and I would have to stand up and face her and I'd have to explain to her why I didn't support her. And I don't think that would be wise of any council member to have to do that.
I understand that, but my point was, and I stated it that night, is I'm a big fan and supporter of small business.
But you didn't support our effort last year for small businesses.
Well, as I stated, small business had the PPP program initially that came out after COVID, specifically for small businesses. It started as a loan and ended up as a grant project. Small business then went to the CARES Act. That came out later, trillions. Well, many of them did. And now we voted in the meeting before last meeting to give 5 or 6 million to the chambers of commerce. 5 million. I thought it was at least 5 million in the motion. And that was the money to be doled out to small business. And then we gave out to individual businesses on the side additional money. I just thought it was the wrong way to go. I had to vote no. I couldn't vote yes, because then I'd be voting for projects that I did not support. So that's all.
Mr. Venus.
Very, very briefly, I was just wondering if I could ask Ms. Booth, if we are going to send out the award letters, I know Ms. Kalman had indicated she's contacting, I don't want to keep stringing them along. Is there some type of a process or a plan in place for these individuals who have been coming week after week? Do we have some type of idea as to when these award letters are going to go out?
So in response to your question, the award letters actually lays out a detailed process from the initial training, not even training, informational session, to how they're going to have folders. And actually these folders can be made available to council. We have no problem releasing any folders. So shared files, and how they're going to send their documentation in. If they're not changing anything, the easy process, it's detailed out in the letter. What we just need to have the letter signed. Then we can do a mail merge because it's all set up, and we can send the letters. If you approve it tonight, my staff's not working this late, but they'll be gone tomorrow. We just need the signatures on the letter. That's all. That's what we need.
So you're just waiting on the signatures from us? That's it?
Signatures from myself and Ms. Radel.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
I signed it.
She will not be back
for the record
until the 19th.
Fine.
Kind of electronic
Yeah,
documents that-
I'm sure that can be figured out. In any case, I think we should continue discussion in regards to booth management, maybe not necessarily our feelings on the process as we, internally made it. Is there any other comment from council?
Well, it's not sole source, it definitely isn't, so it could be bid out.
No, it's not also.
That's
Right.
yeah, and that's something that, if that's what council's pleasure is, then we can certainly, that's why it's on the work session to discuss. Anybody else have anything? Mr. Swets, or, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
County manager, is it possible to renegotiate a little bit with Ms. Booth?
I think that's a conversation with Ms. Booth.
Said here, the cost proposal is negotiable. We didn't negotiate. This is what we were given. I don't know.
Yeah. If I could, one of the things I did do, this was a solicitation. We responded to the solicitation. We went through an evaluation process. There were interviews. There was multiple firms. We got selected. The contract had in it a escalation. My pricing said that it would increase each year by 5%. I did not do that. I kept the same rates that I had for the next year. I proposed it for all years. So it cumulative, my rate would have increased 5% per year cumulative. I'm not doing that. You all have the lowest, I said this in the presentation, and I did not change my rates. My rates stayed the exact same. I just don't think you all understand the level of effort required. And I really don't think you're understanding how critical it is that you get this right. The office of it, I can't emphasize that I'm at OMB this morning. They're talking about all the fraud. They're talking about all the investigations. You just don't want to be in that position, whether it's me or whomever you are, whoever's here. So we can't cut corners. So when you look at the proposal and you see monitoring under section 200.332 of the 2 CFR, you have to monitor everybody you gave an award to. You have to do agreed upon procedures monitoring. You have to review their requests for reimbursements, all of the documentation they send, no matter how much documentation. You have to make sure they meet the performance metrics. That's the federal, go look at section 200.332. Everything I'm telling you is what you have to do. So you have to do it for 113 applications. So the following year, the reason why it decreases so much is because we're going to do the monitoring is in the second year. So then they're phasing out. So most of them should be closing out because that'll be in 2024. So by then you're thinking, that these grants are going to be closing out. And then the last year becomes reporting requirements. We're not even going to talk about that. Now you have to report 113 projects to the Treasury. You have to report the expenditures, obligations, performance metrics. You have to do an annual report that shows the 100 plus, it's really 150. And you have to have the project summaries, which I gave to you for all the projects. That's due in July. So I just really don't think you understand the level of reporting requirements and compliance requirements with these dollars. So I really, and Brian didn't negotiate with me. I negotiated with the hours for myself. I'm like, what's the minimum we can do? Just to keep them on, just to keep it where we're meeting the uniform guidance requirement. These are not Robin's rules. I know y'all like to look up rules, so I'm telling you exactly what section to go to. 200.332. Just go read that. 2 CFR part 200.
Steve will read it.
I read a lot of it.
I know y'all are good. Y'all do research.
I took the diligence and time to read a lot of that stuff, and I concur with you, Ms. Booth, on how complex it is. I mean, I've also taken the time to look at other counties to see what they're doing, and they've already put the reports out online. They put a lot of their stuff, they were very transparent, and it's not like we have to recreate the wheel all the time, just copy some of what they're doing. But ideally, I don't know if we have the staff here do you feel a level of confidence, Mr. Manager, on your staff being able to do this in-house or externally?
I think that was in the submittal. I agree with Mr. McGinley and to, Mr. Perry, maybe negotiate, because again, just like Ms. Booth said, that's exactly what I said. So that probably shouldn't be in the submittal. I did not talk about prices. My suggested change was, again, if it's going to be more than 1 year, let's lay it out as more than 1 year. But I do not think, and I put that in there, it was not a slide on the staff. We have the regular day-to-day, we have things for council meetings, we have an audit deadline. I don't think we, especially for the stuff that's due in July, it's already in the middle of April.
Like I said, I've looked at a lot of what has transpired in other counties, and I see the in-depth detail that they painstakingly, put out there online and processes that they're using. And I've read the CFRs, a couple of them at least. And really, I think some of us on this council are your own worst enemy. Unfortunately, it is very complex, and this is federal money. So, you could get audited by the IG's office. And we went down a slippery slope in some cases, and echo Brian's sentiments here with that resolution. I think that's a very damning resolution to us. You might not see it that way because some of you voted on it in totality, but it wasn't that. I can agree too that I was a proponent of probably 80% or more of those projects, and we should have broke them out at a different level, because it's an up or down vote at the end of the day. So to save face, I'm not going to be the one getting hauled in for voting no, but people that voted yes can get hauled in if they need to get hauled in. That's all I'm saying. Be careful what you do. I try to protect you guys too.
I took that risk and I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
Helped out small businesses and helped out a lot of great organizations.
But the fact that you work for an entity that's receiving money, we don't know what your personal finances are or your.
I explained that.
It's not about explaining it, it's about how you voted, to give an entity that you may have a conflict with additional money. We don't know what your compensation package is with that entity.
I
Nobody
think it
can
was
guess
$0
that.
this year so far, actually.
Well, I get that, but you could say that, but in some other realm, the potential of fraud exists in this country. And that's, you can't go in general information just because you're not doing it or he's not doing it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And we're just trying to protect you. That's all.
Well, if you're accusing any of us of fraud,
No, I'm not
DA's
trying.
office is right over there.
He's not the one responsible for that. That would be FBI.
So while
But
the topic is
yes.
who's proposal here. If we
All
could
right,
stay
is there
on
any
that
other
topic.
discussion on Ms. Booth's proposal? Anybody else?
See it both ways.
All right, thank you, Ms. Booth. Thank you, Mr. Majikis.
Have a nice
I
evening.
accidentally skipped the manager reports before. Apologize for that.
That's fine. I will go through it really quick, Mr. Lombardo.
Yeah.
All the things are attached. I just wanted to give an update, as I said I would, on the meeting that we had yesterday on the Water Street Bridge. Literally probably 2 minutes. The intent of the meeting was to get an update. Everyone in this room, everyone that got the report can read the report. I'm not an engineer. I don't pretend to be an engineer. That's why I have operations people. They really just went through the process of the bridge is scheduled to still be on track for the 2025 letting season. We went about the recommendations of the person who did the work versus some other people. And PennDOT basically said that they can routinely question. So it wasn't a slight on who we picked to do the work. We probably, even though they didn't come out and say this, I was led to believe that regardless of who did the work, we would have ended up in the same place. They talked about some priority 0 and 1s with an estimated price tag of 4.5 million. I think we all know not just the money that we have, even though it is ARP money versus general fund money. By the time this project's done, if it's 2 years and it stays on schedule, you're literally going to reopen the bridge to then tear it down and put up a new bridge. That was, one of the questions. And then kind of to the point before about Duryea, it's not the same thing, just communication. If the bridge is going to be closed, what can we do for traffic signals, work with the municipalities on both sides of the bridge? Because again, it is an inconvenience. If it's not going away, let's move forward and make it the best it could be. And it was probably an 1.5 to 2 hour meeting, and that's 2 minutes. But again, our point for administration and everyone in the room was to be transparent. And if it's not going to reopen, we've got to work with both sides of that bridge to make the intersection safer, see what we can do, work with municipalities. And regardless of who has to pay for it, all work together. And I thought that part was positive out of it.
Thank you, Mr. Swets. Mr. Thornton and West Gavin, you were at that meeting, right?
Yeah.
What were your thoughts?
Well,
Essentially the same, or do you have a?
Yeah, we went there for the purpose, at least I did, to find out, in light of this $280,000 engineer study that we paid for by the county, in light of the fact that it came back positive. It was an in-depth 4-month study, all the calculations, the measurements, the gauges, the loading, and it came back positive, and it came back with a result that the bridge could safely reopen up to 6 tons per vehicle, light loads. So we were thrilled when we heard that, although the director, Rich Roman of the meeting yesterday from PennDOT stated in light of that, in spite of that, they don't want to open the bridge. Basically, it came down to everything we proposed to reopen it, to make sure 6 tons is not exceeded, with the big welded headache bars you put across, flashing lights, even having guards stand there, cameras on the bridge, catching violators. He said, no, they're not going to consider reopening it. So no matter what we suggested, PennDOT decided they're not going to reopen it. Our problem was, if we were told that a year ago, we wouldn't have expended here $280,000 to do an inspection. And it seems evident now that PennDOT had their mind made up a year ago that regardless of what came back on this inspection, the bridge was not going to reopen. And had we known that, we wouldn't have wasted taxpayer money in doing that. But I want the public to know, and the media, that county council tried very, very hard to do what we needed to do and expended every effort we could to get that bridge reopened temporarily till the permanent one is built 4 years from now. And the ultimate decision was made by PennDOT, not county council, was made by PennDOT to keep the bridge closed. I just want everybody to know that. Thank you.
So the only thing I have to add to that is the unfortunate thing is what Mr. Thornton said, we spent $280,000, I feel, for nothing. And I think the exact words I used at the meeting, no pun intended, we pissed it down the river. But what really bothered me is the fact that they try to say that this was known all along, when in fact it wasn't, because we wouldn't have bothered. We had people put a quote forward for $780,000. 730. So if you were willing to spend 730 before we found the 280, what would have made you think that it wasn't a viable project to get that bridge reopened? So out of disgust, I did ask for all the internal emails with PennDOT back and forth, and the exchange here between Luzerne County and PennDOT. And they agreed. And I want to see it all because I want to see who dropped the ball. And if indeed it was PennDOT, then I feel that they owe this county $280,000 because they gave us false hope, and that's not fair. And I think Mr. Roman's words were, well, if we dropped the ball, we're sorry that happened. Well, that doesn't put $280,000 back in our pockets. And I'm sorry, but you deserve to give that back to us. As the once famous Carl Peters said, I'm cheap.
You're right. And I agree with you 100%. I mean, they should have never told us that.
So that's why I was annoyed, most of all, because of the expenditure. And we thought we would have the bridge open. And we made a lot of proposals that we tried hard, and gave a lot of good ideas and everything. It didn't matter. We could have guaranteed them. I think, personally, because of the bridge failure in Pittsburgh, which the design has nothing to do with this bridge. And Mr. Thornton can weigh in on this, but that bridge, it's almost impossible really for that to come down because of the way it's designed.
And we had a study professionally done that indicated that this could take up to a certain amount, and it's solely on PennDOT who's telling us that we can't do this.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And thank you, Brian, for the phone call this morning, giving me the update on everything. I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Mr. River.
Could we get an update on St. Mary's Road and West County Road too? Because I actually was out there on Saturday and it doesn't look like anything was done on those roads. I was driving around the potholes and swerving, trying to miss every one of them.
Yeah, I can email off council. I don't know. Mr. Kurtz has left the building, so I can get it from.
Yeah, it says 320 on here.
Yeah.
Which is already passed, and it definitely wasn't patched, so.
Okay.
You know, unless there's plans to repave the entire stretch. For a couple miles.
We'll email off council.
All right, thank you.
All right, anything else? Okay, discussion regarding ordinance amending 2023 fiscal year budget for the Luzerne County District Attorney. Any discussion?
I just have one question. Do we rehire these people every year? Is that what we do?
Sam was, or somebody from the office was supposed to. I don't know
The
if they
district
are.
attorney is on the Zoom right now. I don't know. Okay, there he is.
Hi,
Go ahead,
guys.
Sam.
No, we don't rehire them every year. We basically get notice pretty well in advance that the grant is going to be active again the next year. So far, I believe our one gun violence reduction officer has been here for 5 years. We've gotten the grant every year, which led to, you know, the successes of that program have led to these additional staff members. So they basically just continue every year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else?
Keep up the good work, Sam. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Discussion with the election director regarding paper ballots. Ms. Harvey?
Good evening. I just came tonight because I know you guys had a couple questions for us regarding the paper ballots. The Bureau management team and myself decided to use paper ballots for this election just because we wanted to try something new. I know we used it for the special back in January. We used paper ballots and we also used them in the 2020 primary as well. We got a lot of good feedback from poll workers and voters about them, so that's why we wanted to try it. It doesn't have to be permanent. It's just something that we want to try. And just give it a try this time. So I'm here to answer any questions anyone has.
Ms. Harvey, do you have anything put in place or are you working on anything just to make sure that, you know, there's some questions about overvoting? I know that there's possibility that the ballot counting machines will be able to recognize overvote. And also, are you doing any extra training for poll workers to make sure that they have, you know, the proper knowledge on what's happening with these paper ballots and how to properly assist people, and, you know, some other things like that?
Yeah, so if you do overvote with the paper ballots, there's going to be a message that displays when you put your ballot into the scanner that says that there's an overvote, and you will have the option to spoil the ballot and redo it. It would be the same thing pretty much on the ballot marking devices. If you did an overvote, it wouldn't let you go to the next page. So essentially, it's the same thing. I know Mr. Griffith was talking about how he votes by mail and he doesn't get that opportunity. But if you went to the polls and we did the ballot marking devices, it's the same thing essentially. So if you do go to the polls, you do have that ability. Whereas if you mail in your ballot, you don't have that ability. So, and we're also doing for poll worker training, we're making sure that we stress to the poll workers that that error will come up and instruct them that they can spoil the ballot and then give the voter another one. So we are addressing that to make sure that everyone's aware and trained properly for this election.
Any other questions for Ms. Harvey? Mr. Thornton, and then Mr. Irvin.
Just real quick, just for the notification of the public. When you say spoil the ballot, how exactly is that before?
Sure. So the judge of elections will take the ballot. They will write spoiled on it, and it then goes into an envelope and it is put back election night to the Bureau. Okay. Those ballots into the black bag.
Mr. Urban.
So some of the problems I see with that process, though, is like, you know, if you give your ballot to a judge of elections, there's no sense of privacy at that point in time. The judge could obviously see how you voted or potentially voted. Understandably, in a special election, you only have 2 candidates on a single sheet of paper from 58 wards. Right?
Yeah, and again, we did it for the 2020 primary as well.
But, you know, you're talking about 76 municipal races this time. You know, a lot more complexity in the process. Has anybody done any type of dry run, you know, as a test in the office with the stopwatch, you know, when the time a person hits the table to sign into a poll book, to take a ballot and mark it up and then put it into a machine and give it back? Because, you know, you have to be able to anticipate how many voters are going to be coming out at the polling locations. Knowing that you have district justice races that are very competitive this year, I think you're going to have an increase in the amount of people going to a polling place. I think you're going across the board and you're having like 4 of those privacy dividers per precinct. Is that correct?
Correct.
From what I read? Well, do some wards actually have more people than others? So do you feel you need to increase the amount of privacy dividers in a ward that might have 2,000 people and a potential like a 30% increase of turnout in a big ward like maybe Sugarloaf or Butler or something like that, where you're going to have a huge magistrate race, or even on the west side, in Kingston? Were these things thought about before you decide to say evenly, I'm going to only have 4 privacy dividers per precinct?
We wanted to make it even across the board to send for the 186 actual precincts. So,
Yeah,
I mean, and there's a lot of places that are shared as well. So, I mean, like places like where I vote, Wilkes-Barre 3 and Wilkes-Barre 2 is in there. I mean, if Wilkes-Barre 3 has an influx of people, there's no issue in taking another one or putting them in that one to vote, because
I see a problem already happening, because if you're going to do 2 and 3, the person that with the 2 ballot might go and put it in a 3 tabulator. Is that going to be a problem?
Well, that's why we have the poll workers watching them to make sure that doesn't happen. But I really don't see a problem with the screens. And again, I mean, we just want to try something new. We would just hopefully have your support. I mean, we had the election board support. They passed this. Our team is supportive of this. So
I think if they went back and voted right now, you might not have the support, because they
well, I can't answer to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've talked to some of them at least, and hindsight's 20/20. I mean, but really you should be looking at a time test. You probably need to anticipate how many people show up to a polling location with more candidates on the ballots. It's going to take people time to decide. You're also looking at local races where Hanover Township School Board is going to be all completely write-in. That's going to be a problem in itself, with trying to read all those people's handwriting and add up all those votes in that school district, because of the debacle with that particular issue. I think that's going to be problematic. I mean, I think it's just, you might have a person in Hanover like Carl who votes for 4 people, someone else voting for 3. You're going to have to tabulate all of those by hand.
Right.
It's going to take time, and having the machine, at least people can type it, you can read it faster.
Right. I mean, at this point, it's too late to go back, and it was too late for when the Hanover Township, unfortunately, that's an unfortunate issue that they did not turn in their paperwork on time, but that's not something we can control, and we already had this plan in place at that time that it happened.
I mean, I also take issue that I recently got a letter to sign and as a candidate that says, okay, this letter is due back by the 7th, but it wasn't mailed out until the 4th. And then you had Good Friday, which is a holiday here at the county. So how in the hell is somebody supposed to really get that back on time to make any changes on the ballot?
Right.
If there were any
We also
mistakes?
sent, you should have gotten a text message as well as an email before that as
I don't
well.
recall
And
getting
we
a
were
text.
putting it on the website 3 weeks. Since 3 weeks, we put it on the website for everyone to check if there's problems. So at this point, there shouldn't be any problems. We've been super transparent with putting that list up, sending emails, sending texts. So we're doing everything we possibly can to
But
make
when
sure.
they send a mailer out, there's 3-day lead time is not.
Respectfully, this is agenda item about paper ballot, correct?
Well, this is about the entire process. This is our board. So we,
Mr. Urban, let's stick to the paper ballots if we can.
when there's a problem, I want you to
I just would
resign,
like to say-
okay?
I just would like to say, there is a certain level of personal responsibility. We're sending texts out, we're sending emails out. This is things that we have never done before, and we are trying to improve this process.
Well,
And
trying it in
the
a
letter
China.
was sent out so that when we got it back, the Bureau had proof on file that those items were checked.
But when you put a date on something, okay, and there's an expectation of being openly honest with the public and yourself, because when you mail out something on the 4th and expect it back by the 7th,
Correct.
it's not even going to get to the person by the 7th.
And
so you're putting those dates out, and you had Good Friday, which is a holiday, so nobody's here in the office.
Wasn't the 4th.
Okay, so does anybody read anything that you're sending out? That's my problem with management, okay? With same thing when you guys had the casting of lots weren't even correct with the date. You're giving this information to the public. Everybody can see this information. Candidates are looking at this information. Get it right. That's all we're asking.
All right, let's please stick to the mail-in or the paper ballot
Does anyone else
conversation.
have any other questions for us?
I mean, quite honestly, I think you need some more privacy dividers and bigger wards too. Don't rely on having people cross boundaries because if they
That's
stick it
just
in.
a suggestion. I mean, we're looking at the voter turnout numbers. We're not expecting a high turnout, but we do have 4 in case of that. So we are prepared.
Just a suggestion, maybe we could send out as many as the machines you would send out to each ward.
So the average machine for each ward is 4. There's 2 that have 7 machines. So we went with 4 because that was the average at each polling location, and we thought that was fair. We do have extra privacy screens, order. We have extra from the special election, and we can certainly send those out with rovers. The ones from the special election do differ from the standing ones that we're sending out with
Personally, I just want to say that I think this is a good decision. I think that there's some questions that members of council and the public have, and a level of trust that they might not have with some of the voting machines based on some past issues that we've had. So, if this is something that we want to try, I'm all for it. Other counties do it in this area. Lackawanna County does it. They always seem to have their results up in a very short order of time. I mean, I paid very close attention to an election last year that involved Lackawanna County, and their votes were up, in very short order. So I have a pretty decent amount of confidence that the county will do this. I just think as long as, we're making sure the poll workers are informed about what they need to do. That would be my only concern. So thank you very much.
Nobody ever sees me. I get a turn. Hold on. What I wanted to say is how many of us were against the Dominion machines? We've had so many problems with them. What other suggestion do you have? Just keep going back to Dominion, and now you're gonna have a problem with the paper ballots. I say, let's try them, and I'm on the ballot this year, so it may not be beneficial for me, but guess what? I'll accept that. You were all against Dominion machines before, and now you're against paper ballots. I don't understand
I was
that.
never against the Dominion machines, I wasn't here, but the fact
Well, we
is
didn't
that.
vote on it, but we've had problems with them, and I think we've all, voiced our concerns and displeasure with the Dominion machines. So here we
The
are.
fact is that you're gonna have an election. You're also gonna have 12 days to adjudicate that election afterwards, 12 business days, where they have to get it certified and correct. And having all that.
How do all the other, okay, so Lackawanna County, I know they're not as big as Luzerne County, but they do it. And it works out well for them. So let's give it a try. Why beat the horse? It's too late now.
We're a bigger county.
I just said that. Yes, we are bigger.
Well, so we have to.
We
have
are,
better
but if we
processes in
don't
place.
try it, we're not gonna know.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. McGinley, go ahead.
Very quickly,
Sure.
it's not the Dominion machines, it's some of the programming you think about. That was some of the issues. Machines work. We gotta make sure you have the right programming and things. We had a heading that was wrong. When somebody looked at the ballot, you had Democratic instead of Republican. That's an error by a human, that's not a machine error.
I was just echoing what some members of council and some members of the public have said to us in public. That's all I was just saying. I'm not saying what my opinion is one way or the other. But thank you. Any other members of council?
I just want to weigh in and say, go back to the green curtain.
Yeah, that worked good. That worked pretty good.
That did work good.
I never used the green curtain.
All right. If there's no other.
You watch it on YouTube.
I'm not the youngest, so.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harvey. All right, next discussion regarding 44 Airport. Mr. Lescavage, would you like to?
We reached out for Greg Pars, of course, to come.
Yeah.
And he was available because it was kind of late.
Yeah.
But what I'll do is I'm gonna make that folder available at the airport, and anybody that has interest can stop by and look it all over and see what the whole project entails. It's about that thick, and everything's spelled out in there. But there's only like 2 copies that exist, so it's not something you want to get passed around and lose.
I requested a copy of that from Mr. Scribola as well. I had a couple of phone conversations with him last week. He had said that he was gonna send something in, even if it wasn't the whole thing, but maybe like a synopsis, and we didn't get it, at least as far as I know. I didn't receive it. So if we can get it off him, that would be great. That would really help in this discussion. He did tell me that there's a couple of projects on that list that are already completed. So one of my concerns was that fuel tank. I guess that's already completed from what he told me.
I think a part of it. I don't think it's the whole thing.
I don't know if the whole thing, yeah.
No, they had some grants.
Because it's like the roof, that roof
Mhm.
on the major part of the building, that's been piecemealed over the last
Right.
7 years.
Yeah, so there's obviously some concerning things, especially, I mean, you can drive by it and you can see some of the condition of the hangars. Those are problematic, but,
So I'll make sure that we have a copy.
okay, yeah, if we could get a copy, even just one copy, throw it in the council office, and we'll have, an opportunity to take a look.
Yep.
I asked
Go ahead.
Mr. Rick Bars.
Yeah.
Be here, because he has a lot of information on the airport.
Mhm.
Is he here?
He's not, but, and again, I'm not trying to hijack your meeting.
Go ahead.
But I had talked to Mr. Kurtz and Mr. Fars about going over there and summarizing it for you. If there's not copies of it and, these are older copies, you don't want them getting destroyed. I had asked them to go over there because again, you should have some sort of summary so you know what you're voting on, so you know what's possibly eligible versus lost revenue. So
I thought it'd be a good idea because you could see the property too while you're there.
Yeah.
So I had asked to send somebody from operations over to see it.
Any other discussion on the airport? Okay, go ahead. Oh, I apologize. Go ahead, Mr. Perry. They have not met yet. I did receive an email earlier this week, I want to say yesterday, from one of the members who is trying to, what?
Oh, I can tell you.
Oh, go ahead. Well, Ms. Lawrence can answer
I
the question.
received an email from Mr. Ritzik.
Yeah.
I did respond. I asked him to call me and I will help him contact all the members, get something set up and get it advertised.
Well, there you go. There's your answer. Yeah, I was copied on that email. I saw it and yeah. Okay, any other discussion on that? Good. All right, discussion regarding West Hazleton Bridge project.
I submitted that because I think everybody in council knows, all of a sudden, right towards the very end of the process, we got an email in this book that said the West Hazelton project is not eligible. Of course, because of the lateness of getting information, it was not included on the vote 2 weeks ago. And they heard the gentleman from West Hazelton, Mike, so you know what the pockets are. But, the eligibility was a question, and all of a sudden, at the end, he said, now it's eligible. Well, we didn't do anything because of the fact the lateness would be added to the list of discussion, whatever. So I think we have to decide how we want to move.
I have a question. Did they already receive money though? Like one pot of money, ARPA
West
money?
Hazelton?
Yeah, because I thought West Hazleton, and the joint sewer authority was all on
I
that.
think the borough themselves.
The borough did not receive.
Mr. Lamar.
Go ahead, Mr. Perry.
When this came to light, I dug up my notes, like crazy notes and all this stuff.
Yes.
And I saw way back, 12/12, we're doing pool 4, West Hazleton. And I'm familiar with that bridge. And I was going through and I said, not eligible. I was saying to myself, what?
Bless you.
I just couldn't figure out why it wasn't, because I know what it's like over there. So I just didn't say anything because everything was, I couldn't say anything. So as it went further, in March, we got the emails, and apparently what happened was some information was not in there that pushed West Hazleton in the QCT status, qualified census tract, which makes them eligible as disproportionately impacted communities. So now that's how it became eligible. So, that's where we're at now. But I was shocked that it wasn't in the beginning, that information probably wasn't there. And I couldn't go back and look at it because it's locked up. But apparently that's what happened, and that's where we're at now. So I think they're qualified, and we have to go forward. And
Sure.
Award it. That's my thing.
Go ahead.
For those of us not familiar with that bridge, I heard the speech tonight from the fire chief, mayor. Is that bridge used frequently by the industrial park, by trucks?
I think one time did, it's not used now.
But not now?
Yes, it's in there, it's in there, it's right in the industrial.
See, because I'm wondering if we can't do something in the future, like we talked about tonight, with maybe company offer a bond, because if there's certain companies beating the heck out of a bridge, why should the whole public pay for that? And, you know, now that doesn't fix this problem right here now. Maybe we should start looking at that. In other words, these industries open up, these giant industries, I'm all for that, for jobs and whatnot. But we fail to put the infrastructure in place to handle those industries. And I'm wondering if this bridge got beat up over the years by some of that big industry in their trucks.
Mr. Barber, just so we recognize as we look at this. The information that we received, he said eligibility was determined by what the applicant submitted. Maybe that's how they're rated, eligible or ineligible. Now we have a second review of an application and second opinion that now it's eligible. Not that I'm looking for it, I hope we never, but we have like 20 other applicants that could come back and say, no, we would like another review, we'd like to submit more information. So, you know, I think West Hazleton, I think that was misrepresented. That's my opinion, but I don't want to open up Pandora's box.
Yeah, I agree, and I have a significant concern about that as well. But I we just move forward as we are and figure, and that's another concern that I had, you know, previously with our discussion regarding. So
one of the things that I just noticed in the one thing when I looked it over was it said stormwater infrastructure in the one part of the application. Maybe it was wording, because to me, stormwater infrastructure is sewers. I don't think of that as a bridge, you know, so it could have been a technicality on that front. I'm not sure.
Anybody else? All right, moving on. Discussion regarding letter to authorities receiving ARPA money regarding rates and fees. Mr. McGinley.
Well, way back when when people were requesting grants, particularly some of the large grants, some of the authorities. Number one, we had asked for 5% match, which we have not even revisited at all. But a lot of these authorities will receive substantial grants, and I know they need them for capital projects. But because of receiving that grant, I'm hopeful that the ratepayers will get some kind of benefit. And I'm talking about all the ratepayers that would be involved in any one of flood protection authority, Luzerne Valley Sanitation. We get to talk to DAMA, there would be another one. But number one, I think it would benefit our citizens at large. Everybody knows inflation costs are rising. So if we could give them a little bit of a relief for a period of time, I think that would be greatly appreciated. I did a draft letter, but it's just a draft. Anybody has any suggestions or whatever, and you know, we should decide parameters of what we want to ask.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, if these grants are paying for these major capital improvements that fees would otherwise be paid for, well, then why can't they give them like some fees for a time?
And some of them are multiples of what their budget is every year.
Right.
So
You know, if you want me to, I'll prepare another letter. I'll take any suggestions for what people feel that should be fees or whatever, and I'll get it back out to council and then move forward with putting it on the agenda at some point.
I have a suggestion, start at 10 years and then drop back to 1.
Okay.
I guess we can't require or mandate it, but it could be.
Well, I think we put this out there in the public. I think it's going to be very difficult for some of those people not to say no. We're going to get, in the case of flood protection, we're getting $8 million.
Right.
I think their annual budget is 1.9.
Yeah. 4 times.
Lombardo, I think during that discussion, we did, we were talking to the flood protection authority, $8.some million. They agreed to reduce the rate, 10%.
Yep.
1 year. Great, actually, good policy, I thought.
Right.
But at least get the ball rolling, but you can get more of that going.
sure. Any other discussion? If anybody has any suggestions, maybe send Mr. McGinley an email.
I'd be happy
You know,
to take it.
work with
I'll
him
get
on
a
this
draft
letter.
ready again, whatever you want.
Can we put some thinly veiled threatening language in there? Future grant consideration will be based on how much.
Let's try a soft approach first.
Yeah.
Instead of a little scavenger program.
Yeah, then we send with scavenging.
All right. Finally, ARPA discussion regarding, what is it, regarding DAMA?
DAMA.
Correct.
No, I think everybody recognized DAMA as the authority that services, I think it's 4 or 5 communities in back now. We had DAMA on our list. In fact, I think they had at least 2 projects that were ruled eligible. Now, obviously, it was publicized that they had some legal issues. We received a call from one of the members of that board. And I think maybe a couple of you might receive calls. And I forwarded the information to John and Kendra. The litigation comes from 13 years ago. And it's all misdemeanors. And as we well know, if DAMA doesn't get some kind of help with some of these grants, the only people who are going to suffer are the ratepayers. That's who's going to suffer. They're going to have to come up with the revenue to pay for some of those projects that maybe we can help with. You know, it's up to council to make that decision, but you know there was 2 or 3 projects that were ruled eligible. My suggestion, and I think I forwarded with John, we earmarked a certain amount of money, say to DAMA, get your house in order, get the litigations figured out. We have money set aside. If we do all those things, get it figured out, we can then can move forward with a grant. But that's just my thoughts on it.
Thank you, Mr. McGinley. Any other discussion?
So
Mr. Thornton?
by not granting them the money is not really punishing DAMA, it's punishing the
Ratepayers.
just the residents.
Right.
And
that's who's being punished in the manner that their revenues have to come up, so it means their fees have to go up.
Right.
And maybe we hold that money out when they do get their house in order and say, give the ratepayers a reduction for a year.
I think we would do the same thing that we would do with the other people, right? And ask for that as part of the grant.
And again, these people that are requesting this money from the board were not there when all of
right.
these issues occurred 13 years ago.
13 years ago, that's a pretty long time.
So,
Council wasn't here 13 years ago.
any other discussion? Public comment? Mr. Griffith?
Let me try and focus on election integrity. I was amazed when the director stood here and said we wanted to try something new. That was not what she told the Bureau of Elections. I was at the meeting. The reason for going with paper ballots was because we couldn't afford to program the machines. That was what we were told. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to try something new. From a county that can't afford to buy paper, we're going to try something new. I'm feeling really warm and fuzzy about that statement. We're going to try something new. As far as Dominion machines, yes, I was not in favor of Dominion machines, and Ms. McDermott is correct. Some of the people are against Dominion machines because we don't think they're as accurate as they can be. I'm not against the machine. I'm against the process. We have ballot marking devices, and they said to, this girl stood here right now tonight and said that those machines were able to be, let me see if my notes are here. You could not overvote on a BMD machine. You could not. It was impossible. Yet she stood here and said you could overvote on an electronic machine and it would tell you that you overvoted. It wouldn't let you overvote. It didn't tell you you overvoted. It wouldn't let you overvote. The machine wasn't allowed. This is the type of incompetence that's always here at this meeting. We need to get our house in order. 2020, she said we use paper ballots. We did not. We were all here. We didn't use paper ballots in 2020. We used the BMDs. We were in the polling places. It was COVID. And they sent mail-in ballots to those folks that wanted them, and you could go to the polling place and vote if you wanted to. They were available. I remember that. No, that's not true.
In the primary.
Yeah.
In the primary, we definitely use paper ballots.
Everybody used paper ballots.
As far as, I mean, I know I use paper ballot.
I thought the machines were in use.
In the general election. Yeah, in the
In the
general
general
election, I
election.
believe that we went back to
Yeah.
the ballot marking devices, but in the primary.
That was when the
1000%
machines would
used.
just they were just implemented because in 2019, they were voted on. So
Right.
that would have been the first
Yep.
election and we went in there and they weren't working.
But I'm concerned about the $3.9 million that this council appropriated for machines and now we're not using. That's the issue that I'm having. And the fact that we're telling people that if you vote with that tabulator and that ballot goes through with 7 votes on it, it's going to give you the option to revote. You're disenfranchising everybody who votes by mail-in because they don't have that opportunity. Whether the vote is cast or not, if I vote for 7 votes as a mail-in ballot and you rip that ballot open, you send it through the tabulator and that race doesn't count, that's not fair to me if I don't get to do that ballot over. That is not fair. When if you go in and vote at the polling place and you put your name through the tabulator, it comes up with an overvote and you push the button and the ballot comes back out and you can overvote. You can vote again. You have the opportunity to vote twice. That is not fair. That process needs to be fixed in this county. If we want election integrity, let's look at election integrity and stop with the nonsense that we're going to do it because we're going to try something new. For goodness sake, let's fix it, not try something new. I understand it can work. But for goodness sake, we got candidates that spend a lot of money here.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Anybody else for public comment in the audience? We have 2 people on the Zoom. Mr. Rabo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark Rabo from Hazleton. 2 points. One is about the bridge for Water Street. I concur wholeheartedly with Mr. Lescavich and Mr. Thornton with respect to PennDOT. I mean, for God's sakes, you have the acting secretary of PennDOT, who is a former state rep of the Pittston area, for God's sakes. And he's actually putting a kibosh to using for the water for the people who live in Pittston City and West Pittston to use the Water Street Bridge. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is the same character who in front of council as a state rep, and Mr. McGinley and Mr. Urban remembers, he was the one who pushed for the $5 registration fee. He was not only encouraging, he was insisting that the county put the $5 registration fee, even though he knew the gas tax money was being used to pay down Pennsylvania State Police pensions. So I think Mr. Carroll owes Luzerne County residents, especially the Pittston residents, an explanation and a reimbursement for that $350,000. Also, with respect to the authorities, I made mention of the water distribution upgrades for Hazleton City Authority. Hazleton City Authority was booted out for applying for the county ARP money early on in the process, like some of the other municipalities and municipal authorities. So I think it's not just one, it was a few. I believe Freelandborough came by and said they were booted off the first time as well. So I agree, I concur with what Mr. Perry said about with West Hazleton Bridge. You know, that should have been considered, you know. So I think that needs to be looked at. And as far as the voting machines go, I was here for the voting machines when they were all being considered, and people on the election board at the time actually brought up the fact that the maintenance for the machines wasn't going to be taken care of for the funding by the state. So I don't understand why our state, now we have new legislators, obviously, in our county, but the previous legislators did not, open a dialogue with the county council previously once the machines were purchased. And I believe some of the council members at the time expressed this. So I think that there needs to be a dialogue now that the state is considering the budget. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much to the council for giving me the opportunity to serve on the Blighted Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Rabo. Mr. McCabe? Yeah. Mr. McCabe, did you have a comment that you would like to make? Okay. Ms. Hogarth? Ms. Hogarth?
Yes, Mr. Lombardo,
Do you have a comment that you'd like to make? You had your hand up.
I do. Oh,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
You did, so you don't have a comment you'd like to make?
Nope, I must have hit the mouse.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry.
Okay, Ms. Pissarro.
Good evening, council. I just wanted to, Alyssa Fusero, Luzerne Borough. I just wanted to remind council, just in case, for future reference, just in case things go awry, that the Luzerne Board of Elections and Registration does not have the authority to decide whether we use paper ballots or the machine. Currently, that is the decision of the Bureau, and until council changes the administrative code, we will no longer make those decisions. So even though we voted in favor of that, it doesn't really matter. That's not really our decision. So I wanted to make that very clear. Thank you so much. And you guys have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Ms. Pissarro. Mr. McCabe?
Motion to adjourn.
I apologize. I think he's having a problem with trying to get unmuted.
Star 6.
Star 6, Mr. McCabe. I don't know if you're on Zoom or on the phone.
Just like Carl.
Okay, all right, Mr. McCabe, if you have a comment that you'd like to submit, you can just send us an email. I apologize. I don't know what's going on. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? All right, meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.